Ethan, let's get married. Hazel Palmer's frail body stood shivering in the cold wind. She looked at the man anxiously, her eyes filled with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. Ethan Sterling, his car door half open, glanced at her with a flicker of surprise, clearly not expecting her to bring this up so suddenly. "I'm pregnant," Hazel said, her slender fingers twisting the hem of her coat. She wasn't sure if this would be good news to him. Ethan's brow furrowed instantly. After a brief pause, he answered without a shred of hesitation, "Get rid of it." Those 3 cold words were like 1,000 arrows piercing her heart. Hazel blinked back the tears welling in her eyes, forcing down the lump in her throat. "The doctor said if I have another abortion, I might never be able to get pregnant again. Ethan, I want this child." In the 5 years they'd been together, she'd had 3 abortions. Each one was an agony she thought she couldn't survive, yet she had given in every time because she loved the man standing before her. But this time was different. The thought of never being able to have his child again, of losing that possibility forever, tore her heart to pieces. She couldn't accept such a reality. "Hazel," Ethan's face darkened, his tone firm and final, "I am not going to marry you. A child would be a burden for us. You wouldn't want your child to be illegitimate, with no proper name or status." Hazel couldn't help but smile, a bitter self-mocking twist of her lips. He had a point, yet her heart ached with a suffocating sorrow. "It's because of her, isn't it?" Her voice was barely a whisper, as soft as dust. Staring into the bottomless depths of his eyes, she found that every word she uttered trembled. She had always known he held a torch for someone else, an obsession that wouldn't die. But that woman was gone. Why couldn't he turn around and finally see her? She had believed her patient waiting would eventually be rewarded, but 5 years had brought her nothing but one despair after another. Ethan's eyes narrowed as he looked at her crestfallen face, a spark of irritation kindling in his chest. "Hazel, stop making a scene." A scene? All she wanted was to keep their last child, and to him, it was just her being unreasonable. "Ethan Sterling, you never loved me at all," Hazel said, a stiff, ugly smile plastered on her face. "You're only with me because I look like her. In the end, I'm just a replacement you need to comfort you when she can't be by your side. From the very beginning, she was the only one you ever loved." "Hazel," his roar shattered what little strength she had left. Hazel's body trembled, and she bit her lip so hard the taste of blood filled her mouth. Ethan's anger swelled, but after a moment he managed to suppress it, his voice turning cold and detached. "I'll arrange the surgery as soon as possible." "Is there really no room for discussion?" Before she could finish, she heard the car door slam shut. The vehicle sped away, leaving her in its wake. She stood alone in the biting cold, understanding that this was his answer. "Ethan Sterling, you are truly ruthless." The abortion was scheduled for the next day. This wasn't Hazel's first time here. Standing outside the operating room, her legs felt weak and shaky. The memories of the previous procedures were still vivid, and she took several steps back in fear. She hadn't slept all night. She had called Ethan countless times and sent a flood of texts, but he hadn't shown the slightest sign of changing his mind. "Are you sure you want to go through with the abortion?" The doctor was a familiar face. He had performed all her previous surgeries. The meaning behind his question was clear. Once this decision was made, there was no turning back. "Yes," Ethan replied resolutely. "This procedure carries a high risk of permanent infertility. Are you sure you don't want to reconsider?" Hazel grabbed Ethan's sleeve, her voice a humble, desperate plea. "Ethan, please don't. Can we keep this baby? Please, I'm begging you." "Hazel." Ethan pried her fingers off his arm and pushed her toward the operating room, his eyes devoid of any warmth. Hazel's heart clenched painfully as she heard him say, "Be a good girl and have the surgery. I'll wait for you outside." Tears streamed uncontrollably from her eyes, and she finally broke into sobs. "Don't be so cruel to me, Ethan Sterling. Don't be so cruel," seeing her face etched with sorrow and despair. Ethan felt a flicker of pity, but he knew this child could not be kept. He looked away, his handsome brow furrowed in what seemed like impatience. "Go on in." At his words, Hazel stopped crying, letting the tears fall freely, blurring her entire face. She stood before him, her hands and feet ice cold, feeling as if he were a world away. "I don't need you to marry me anymore. I just want to keep this baby, is that okay?" Hazel wiped the tears from her eyes, forced to negotiate again and again. She looked at him with red, swollen eyes, hoping for a shred of mercy, but Ethan's next words plunged her back into an icy abyss. "Hazel, under no circumstances will I let you keep this child." He stared at her, his face grim, each word spoken with absolute certainty, like a cold-blooded, heartless devil. "Is that so?" Hazel laughed bitterly, murmuring as if in a trance. "This is our last child, we'll never have another." As Ethan watched her desolate figure walk away, he instinctively took 2 steps forward, about to reach for her, when his phone rang. He answered distractedly, his heart pounding with an almost explosive frustration as he heard the operating room door close with a thud. But when he heard the news from the other end of the line, he froze. His face filled with shock, which quickly transformed into unbridled joy. "You're saying Grace isn't dead?" Hazel didn't know how she made it into the operating room. Lying on the table, she stared into the glaring lights as memories flashed before her eyes, each one a poisoned arrow striking her heart. The sweeter the happiness once was, the crueler the memory felt now. 5 years ago, she had accidentally bumped into Ethan at her father's company and had fallen for him at first sight. Driven by the recklessness of youth, she ignored everyone's warnings and chased after him like a moth to a flame. She thought her persistence had moved him, and she had basked in the sweetness he offered. When she later found out about Grace, she had been heartbroken and had caused a scene, but he had always managed to soothe her with just a few words. She couldn't compete with a dead woman, but her obsessive love for Ethan made her compromise time and again. Back then, Hazel thought she could do without marriage, without children, without anything, as long as she could be with him. For him, she had a falling out with her parents, severing ties with them. For him, she gave up her studies. She humbled herself to the point of being like dust, only to lose herself completely in his world. "This has to be the last time my heart breaks." The procedure didn't take long. When Hazel came out of the operating room, her face was ashen. She scanned the waiting area, but there was no sign of Ethan. She lowered her gaze, a self-mocking smile playing on her lips. He had said he would wait for her outside, but he couldn't even keep that simple promise. Hazel felt weak and sick. She steadied herself against the wall and took a few steps forward. How pathetic. She's in here having an abortion while he's completely forgotten her because his beloved is back. The scornful words of 2 nurses hit Hazel's ears. She stopped dead in her tracks and stared at them. "What did you say? Who's back?" Her eyes widened in disbelief as a terrible premonition drained all the strength from her body. One of the nurses sneered, "Grace Caldwell, of course. Everyone knows she's the woman Mr. Sterling has been obsessed with." Grace. But isn't she dead? How you wish she were dead, don't you? But life's not so kind. She's alive and she's already back. The words struck Hazel like a bolt of lightning. She stood frozen, her lips trembling, her hand clutching her abdomen tighter and tighter. Grace is back. Hazel spent hours in the kitchen, but her anxiety only grew. After she finished cooking dinner, she waited for a long time. The food grew cold, but Ethan never came home. No matter how busy he was, he always made it back before 10. She sat at the dining table, her palm clutching her phone slick with sweat. She dialed his number over and over, only to disconnect the call each time. She stared at the clock on the living room wall, counting as another hour ticked by. The house was empty and silent. There wasn't a sound from outside the villa. Was he not planning on coming home tonight? His first love, back from the dead. How thrilled must he be? Hazel desperately wanted to call and ask him to come home, but a self-mocking thought stopped her. For the past 5 years, she had been the one clinging to him. Just this once, she wanted to be defiant. She wanted to make a bet that Ethan would ultimately choose to return to this home. Her appetite was gone. After clearing away the cold dishes, she went upstairs to rest. She tossed and turned in bed for what felt like an eternity, listening to the ticking of the clock. A discomfort in her abdomen grew into a sharp, persistent pain. She curled into a ball, pulling the blankets tightly around herself, but she couldn't stop the chilling ache that racked her body. 3 in the morning. Ethan still hadn't returned. Covered in a cold sweat, her mind growing hazy, she fumbled for her phone and managed to call him. It rang a few times before someone picked up, but the voice that answered belonged to a woman. "Hello, who is this?" Hazel's voice trembled. "Is Ethan Sterling there?" "Ethan?" the woman chuckled. "He's already asleep. If you have a message, you can tell me. I'll pass it along." Asleep? A dull pain throbbed in Hazel's heart. She curled her body tighter. Never mind. The woman on the other end fell silent for a few seconds before replying in a breezy tone, "All right." The line went dead. Hazel stared at the darkening screen, a chill spreading through her entire body. The gnawing pain in her abdomen was nothing compared to the agony in her heart. She had just had an abortion and was all alone in this cold house, while he was sleeping with his old flame, without a single thought for her suffering. She didn't know how long the pain lasted before she finally drifted into an exhausted sleep. When she woke the next day, the space beside her was empty. Ethan hadn't come home at all. Hazel stood in the vast, empty living room, tilting her head back as far as it would go, but tears still streamed down her face. When she had cut ties with her parents, all her relatives and acquaintances had said she was crazy, that she had lost all reason for a man. Hazel had to admit Ethan Sterling had become her obsession. For 5 years, her world had revolved around him. If he were to disappear, her world would shatter into a million pieces beyond repair. After a morning spent in a daze, she couldn't wait any longer. She drove to Sterling Corporation. Before she even got out of her car, she saw Ethan walking out of the building. And clinging enthusiastically to his arm was a woman Hazel was certain was Grace. She had seen photos of Grace before, but even if she hadn't, she would have recognized that face, those eyes, because they were nearly an 80% match to her own. Ethan rarely smiled, but now he was looking down at the woman with an indulgent expression, listening to her chatter and laugh. He seemed to be savoring the moment. Hazel's knuckles turned white as she gripped the steering wheel. She didn't get out. She watched them get into a car and drive away. She followed them and saw them stop at the Sterling family estate. Hazel stared up at the old mansion and couldn't help but laugh. As she laughed, tears traced a bitter, stinging path down her cheeks to the corners of her mouth. The Sterling estate. She had never once set foot inside. Ethan had never even thought of taking her home. It felt like a brutal blow to the heart. Hazel sat in the car, tears streaming down her face. 5 years of devotion had turned out to be nothing but an illusion, a dream. Now that the dream was shattered, she was lost, panicked, and utterly helpless. She drove home in a daze, waiting for Ethan. She still believed he would come back. 5 years. It was impossible that she held no place in his heart at all. That evening, when Ethan's car pulled up in front of the villa, Hazel excitedly threw open the door and ran into his arms. She hugged his lean waist tightly, crying tears of joy. "Hazel, I need to talk to you." Ethan pulled her away. His brow was furrowed, his expression serious. Hazel's heart sank. She looked up at him in shock, her eyes darting away as she turned toward the kitchen. "I'll make you dinner. Don't bother." Ethan pulled her back. Hazel stumbled, her legs feeling so weak they could barely support her. "I don't want to hear it." Hazel forced a pained smile, looking down to avoid his gaze, her eyes searching for a place to rest. "Hazel," Ethan's tone held a hint of annoyance. Before he could continue, tears welled up in Hazel's eyes. She sniffled, trying to act nonchalant. "Go on, I'm listening." "Grace is back." "I know. You know I've never been able to let her go all these years." "So?" Hazel defiantly lifted her head, the smile she forced onto her face stiff and unnatural. "If you can't let her go, you can spend a few more days with her." "It's fine. I'll be okay here alone. If you don't come back, I'll only have to cook for one. It'll save me a lot of trouble." "Hazel," Ethan interrupted, his sharp brow creased. "You know what I mean." "I don't." Tears instantly flooded Hazel's eyes, blurring her vision of his face. She was laughing and crying at the same time, her words a jumbled mess. "Be good to her. I don't mind. It's a miracle to have her back, I get it. How could you just forget all those beautiful memories?" "Hazel." The sight of the woman fighting back tears made Ethan's chest feel inexplicably tight and uncomfortable. He gripped her shoulders to steady her as she was about to lose control. His tone was graver than she had ever heard. "I'm leaving you this villa. Name your price for a separation payment. If you don't want to stay in this city, I'll send you abroad. You've always wanted to go to Provence, haven't you? I can send you there." She did want to go to Provence, but only with him. Without him, there was nowhere she wanted to go. Hazel blinked back her tears, still not daring to look him in the eye. She shook her head. "I wasn't with you for any of this, Ethan. I was with you for a lifetime. I never thought we would break up. I don't accept this. I won't accept this outcome." Ethan knew how stubborn she could be, but seeing her so obstinate now, his brow tightened, and a heavy frustration settled in his chest. He loosened his tie, his voice growing heavier. "Whatever else you want, just name it, and I'll give it to you." Tears streamed down her face. "I don't want anything except for you. I don't want anything." Ethan's eyes darkened, a sudden surge of anger rising within him. His lips formed the cruel words, "You can have the villa, and I'll give you $10 million as compensation for the last 5 years. If you think that's not enough, you can ask for more." Without another word, he went upstairs to pack his things. Hazel stumbled after him into the room and wrapped her arms around him from behind. Ethan frowned and pulled her off, tossing her onto the floor. Looking at the man's heartless face, she finally screamed, "Compensation for 5 years? How can you compensate me? My 5 years of youth, 5 years of waiting, do you just dismiss it all like it was nothing?" "Ethan Sterling, I just had an abortion for you. I might never be able to have children again, and now you're telling me you don't want me anymore. Grace is back, so you can just throw me away like trash." Ethan's profile was rigid, his expression grim. His deep-set eyes, like glacial pools, fixed on Hazel's distraught face. After a long moment, his voice came out as cold as frost. "Hazel, you don't understand the thrill, the gratitude, of having the person you love come back from the dead. You've never experienced it, so you can't possibly know what it feels like for me right now, wanting to make up for the 5 years she was gone." Ethan's words left Hazel stunned, unable to process anything for a long time, not until he had gone downstairs and left, not until the house was so silent it felt deserted. The thrill and gratitude of a return from the dead. Yes, she had never experienced it, so she truly couldn't understand. She didn't know how passionate a love like that could be. What could she do besides envy and jealousy? So, what about her 5 years? Was her love worthless? Did she have to die to be worthy of Ethan Sterling's memory? News of Grace's return spread quickly. The glaring headlines felt like daggers to Hazel's heart, which was already as cold as dead ashes. Over the next few days, Felix Asher handled all the paperwork for her. Everything Ethan had instructed was taken care of with cold efficiency. "Miss Palmer, this is your plane ticket to Provence. Mr. Sterling asked me to take you to the airport." Ha, Hazel couldn't help but curl her lip. Was Ethan so eager to get rid of her that he couldn't wait another moment? She hadn't been well these past few days. Her appetite was gone, and she had lost a noticeable amount of weight. Seeing her curled up on the sofa, hugging her knees, even Felix felt a pang of pity. Hazel's pale face was expressionless as she rose like a zombie. "I want to go see my parents." "Well, I'll just go see them. An hour at most." Felix glanced at the time. "But your flight boards in an hour." "What? I can't even make a simple request like that now?" Hazel stared blankly ahead. "Go ask Ethan Sterling if he's not even willing to give me 1 more hour." Felix knew she was in a foul mood. He stepped back and quietly made a call to Ethan. Hearing his report, Ethan's brow tightened. Let her be. But after he hung up, a dull ache throbbed in his chest, accompanied by a strange sense of foreboding. Ethan, who was that? Grace was in the middle of a checkup and turned to ask him with a smile. Ethan walked over and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her forehead. "It was nothing important. How are you feeling?" "Much better. Thank you, Ethan, for coming to my follow-up appointment with me." "Silly girl." Ethan kissed her forehead, his voice a low, soothing murmur. "You endured so much alone these past 5 years. Now that I'm here, I'll always be with you. Ethan, you're so good to me." Grace nestled against him, her face radiant with happiness. Ethan gently stroked her hair, his expression full of affection, but a flicker of unease still lingered in the depths of his eyes. The winter sun offered little warmth, but it still stung Hazel's eyes. She refused Felix's offer to drive her and drove herself toward the Palmer residence. The drive took about half an hour. Stepping out of the car and into the old estate, she was struck by a desolation she had never felt before. The house used to be so lively, but today she didn't see a single person as she walked up the path. The flowers and plants in the garden had all withered, looking as if they hadn't been tended to in a very long time. Something felt wrong. She strode into the house. It was empty. Just as she was about to pull out her phone, someone emerged from the backyard. "Can I help you?" Hazel was taken aback. The face was unfamiliar. It must be a new maid. "I'm looking for Mr. Palmer." "Oh, you mean the Mr. Palmer who used to live here? They moved out a long time ago." Moved out? Hazel was stunned. What did that mean? Leaving the old estate, Hazel called her father, a knot of confusion and dread in her stomach, only to find his number was no longer in service. It had been over 4 years. How could she not have known that the Palmer Corporation was in trouble, that her father had sold their family home, that she didn't even have his new phone number? A chill washed over Hazel, and tears welled in her eyes. Swallowing the lump in her throat, she dialed one number after another until she finally got her parents' new address from her uncle. But he told her they hadn't been in contact with any relatives for 2 or 3 years, so no one knew the full story. The address led her to an old, run-down apartment complex. As she entered the dark, grimy stairwell, the walls plastered with flyers and a foul smell hanging in the air, her heart ached with every step. Her parents had always been meticulous about cleanliness. How could they bear to live here? She hadn't asked for the exact apartment number and wandered the corridor for a long time. Eventually, someone passed by and asked, "Miss, who are you looking for?" Hazel's throat tightened nervously. "I'm looking for Lawrence Palmer. He's..." She was about to describe her father's appearance when she suddenly froze. Her nose stung with the threat of tears. She didn't even know what her father looked like now. 5 years, he must have aged so much. The person looked her up and down, then frowned in disgust. "You're not Hazel Palmer, are you?" "Ha!" A group of 2 or 3 girls recoiled as if she were something dirty. "You're quite the celebrity around here." "Oh wait, you're famous all over the internet now." Exactly, abandoning your own parents for fame and fortune. What an ungrateful wretch, but I guess it's karma. In the end, his real love came back. So what does that make her? A home wrecker? A mistress? Poor Mr. Palmer. He died without even getting to see his daughter one last time. People like her deserve to rot in the 18th level of hell. Hazel, mortified, had been about to leave, but she froze. She whirled around and grabbed one of the girls. "What did you say?" Hazel was trembling from head to toe, enveloped in a chilling cold. She stood before the old door, her raised hand shaking in midair, unable to bring herself to knock. Just then, the door opened. Her tears broke free in an instant. Her mother, Catherine Palmer, looked up. The white hair that now covered her head, the deep wrinkles etched on her face, the way she had to squint to see clearly the sight made Hazel collapse to her knees. "Mom!" Her choked sobs echoed in the stairwell. The bag of trash in Catherine's hand fell to the floor with a thud. Hazel went to the cemetery and knelt before her father's gravestone until the sun went down. Felix had called several times, but she didn't answer. Later, Ethan called too. She could practically feel his anger through the phone. Her mother had told her. Her father had been gone for over a year. When the Palmer Corporation ran into trouble, Ethan Sterling hadn't just refused to help. He had kicked them while they were down, swallowing their company whole. Her father, overwhelmed with anger and grief, passed away not long after. Her mother said they hadn't told her because her father didn't want to break her heart. He knew how much she loved Ethan Sterling, and all he had ever wanted was for his daughter to be happy. He, her father, knew better than anyone how fragile she was, and he had loved her too much to hurt her. Kneeling before her father's grave, Hazel wept uncontrollably. She had been wrong from the very beginning. "Dad, I'm so sorry. Scold me, please. I shouldn't have disobeyed you. I was wrong." I was so wrong? It was late when Hazel returned, feeling completely lost. As she walked into the living room, she saw Ethan sitting on the sofa, his face a dark storm cloud, radiating pure fury. The moment she entered, he stood up and advanced on her. Before Hazel could say a word, he had seized her wrist and slammed her against the wall. A searing pain shot through her back, but it was nothing compared to the agony in her heart. Hazel blinked her swollen, aching eyes, trying desperately not to let the tears fall. But the furious expression on his face was like a knife twisting in her heart, over and over. He was angry. Angry because she hadn't obeyed him, because she hadn't left. After 5 years with him, it was only today that she finally understood. In Ethan Sterling's heart, she was nothing more than a high-class bed warmer. "Hazel, what do you think you're doing?" Ethan slammed his fist against the wall next to her head, the impact making her skull throb. Hazel's body felt limp and powerless. She stared at him with empty eyes and then let out a self-mocking laugh. The sound made Ethan's brow furrow in displeasure. The woman who had always been so obedient, so sensible, who had always deferred to him, was actually looking at him with scorn. Ethan's eyes narrowed, his anger intensifying. But Hazel's voice was unnervingly calm when she asked, "The collapse of Palmer Corporation. You deliberately kept the news from me, didn't you?" Her eyes were hollow, devoid of any light, filled only with desolation and despair. "I was with you for 5 years. Wasn't that enough to earn a little mercy for my family's company? Ethan, even if I was just your lover, I shouldn't have ended up like this." Her voice cracked, turning into a sob. Her shoulders trembled uncontrollably. She was filled with a boundless rage, a bottomless despair. Her 5 years with him were less than a joke. Ethan frowned. "Hazel, don't be ungrateful. If I hadn't taken over, your father would have ended up in a much worse state. I didn't tell you for your own good. You'd already cut ties with him. It was better for you not to know. I'm sure your father wouldn't have wanted you to know either." Ethan Sterling, Hazel couldn't listen anymore. It was all so laughable. Why did he always have an excuse? Why could he always do whatever he wanted with such self-righteousness, as if the entire world should revolve around him? He wanted her, so he took her. He didn't want her, so he cast her aside. He could even justify his wrongdoing so casually. "And what about my father's death?" Hazel gritted her teeth, her jaw trembling. "I'm his daughter, and I didn't even get to see him one last time. Ethan, why do you have to be so cruel to me?" Her hysterical questions seemed to stun him. Ethan stared into her bloodshot, grief-stricken eyes, and his own darkened. "You're saying Mr. Palmer passed away? Enough, Ethan." Hazel let out a cold laugh that quickly dissolved into uncontrollable sobs. "Ethan, stop pretending. Who are you? Do you really think you wouldn't have known about this? No, to you, I, Hazel Palmer, am just cheap trash. I'm the pathetic woman who would abandon her own family for you. So you thought I should just be your puppet, controlled by you, content to just stay by your side. Did my feelings ever matter to you?" That was her father. How could he be so cruel? Was her father's death so insignificant to him? He didn't even let her see her father one last time. She only found out about his death now. "Hazel, you are an unfilial daughter. You deserve to rot in the 18th level of hell." Hazel. Ethan's face was grim. Seeing her pull at her hair in a self-destructive fit of grief, he felt a strange twinge in his heart. He reached out and pulled her into his arms, murmuring softly, "Don't be so upset. Be good." Hazel struggled, pushing against him with all her might. She had had enough of his sweet talk, enough of his fake concern, but the man held her fast, easily pinning her against his chest until her struggles weakened. Only then did his brow relax slightly. Hazel looked up, her face streaked with tears. She saw a flicker of worry in his eyes and feared it was just an illusion. Her voice softened. "Ethan, tell me this is all just a bad dream, okay?" She couldn't bear it anymore. It wasn't supposed to be like this. The ending wasn't supposed to be like this. Say something. She gripped his arms, her body trembling, her eyes filled with a desperate, bewildered hope. "Tell me you haven't abandoned me. Tell me my father is still alive and well. Ethan, we said we'd grow old together. You said I would be the only woman in your life. Ethan." Suddenly, a woman's voice cut her off. Hazel froze, slowly turning toward the sound. Grace, dressed in a silk nightgown with a charcoal gray shawl draped over her shoulders, was elegantly descending the stairs. The faint smile on her lips, her serene and noble air, stood in stark contrast to Hazel's disheveled state. Hazel's hands fell limply from Ethan's arms. Why was Grace here? She couldn't help but laugh, a cold, bitter sound. She slowly turned her gaze to Ethan, suddenly realizing how pathetic she was. What was she still deceiving herself about? He was eager to send her away, eager to have Grace move in. He wouldn't even leave her a sliver of hope to cling to. "Hazel, you're here." Grace walked over gracefully, her every movement elegant, her smile dazzlingly beautiful. Hazel silently clenched her fists, unable to utter a single word. "Why are you standing by the door? Come in." Grace acted every bit the mistress of the house, poised and generous, while Hazel felt like an outsider, a guest. Grace took Hazel's wrist and led her into the living room, turning to speak to Ethan over her shoulder. "What are you still standing there for? Hazel just came in from outside. Her hands are freezing. Tell a maid to get her a cup of hot tea." Ethan gave a slight nod. As he walked away, Hazel took a moment to look around the house. She had lived here for 5 years and had long considered it her home. But this home, it felt different. The furniture seemed to have all been replaced, its arrangement changed. And there were several maids now. Hazel's hands and feet grew cold, a chill spreading all the way to her heart until it felt like a block of ice. She had personally chosen all the old furniture. She had put so much thought into decorating this house. Ethan had told her that as long as she liked it, she could do whatever she wanted, so he had let her decorate the house in a whimsical, girly style. He had said he didn't want anyone to disturb their private world, so they had never had maids. But everything was different now. Hazel's heart ached, a pain so intense she could barely stand. Was it because this house had a new mistress? I'm not fond of bright, flashy colors, so Ethan had everything changed. Grace spoke casually, as if making small talk. He's always been like that, so considerate of me. He was afraid I'd get tired, so he hired 4 or 5 maids. He really is a good man. As Grace spoke, a blissful smile spread across her face, her eyes filled with sweet happiness. But each word was like a needle piercing Hazel's heart, leaving it a bloody mess. A good man? Ha! He was only a perfect gentleman when it came to Grace. Hazel felt on edge, unable to sit still. She knew she should get up and leave, that there was no place for her in this house anymore. But where could she go? When she left the cemetery, she had been consumed by hatred for Ethan, yet she found that the only place she could think to return to was here. She couldn't let her mother know about her current situation. Her mother would go insane. She wanted an answer. Had she given up everything only to end up like this? She couldn't accept it. She refused to accept it. Hazel's eyes searched for Ethan. Grace stopped her, her tone laced with an almost imperceptible disdain. Miss Palmer, if you had any self-respect, you wouldn't be clinging to Ethan. You shouldn't have come back here tonight. Hazel's shoulders tensed. She turned to face her. The woman who had been so gentle and poised just moments ago now wore a sharp, arrogant expression. This was originally my home. Why can't I come back? Her brow furrowed, her posture turning defensive. Grace laughed, her lips curling in contempt. This place never belonged to you. It was a taunt, a mockery. Hazel fought to suppress the rage boiling inside her, feeling as if she might explode. She didn't want to get into a verbal spat. She had never been good at catfights. You should know that you're nothing but my replacement, Grace continued, seeming determined not to let her go, her words growing more and more vicious. If it weren't for this face of yours, do you think you would have ever had the chance to stay by his side? Miss Palmer, clinging to him so shamelessly now, it's just pathetic. Clinging to him shamelessly, so when he told her to get lost, she should have just obediently crawled away? Sorry, she couldn't do that. Even if she were to die, she wanted to die knowing the truth. Hazel's body was tense, trembling with anger. I just want to ask him myself. She just wanted to ask him, in these 5 years, did he truly never love her at all? Was she, from beginning to end, really just a substitute? Miss Palmer, don't touch me, Hazel was already simmering with fury. When Grace reached out to touch her, she instinctively recoiled in disgust. With a single shove, she sent Grace tumbling to the floor. Her eyes widened in shock. Before she could figure out what to do, she was shoved aside with brutal force. Caught off guard, she slammed hard against the corner of a table. A wave of pain washed over her. She gripped the edge of the table to keep herself from collapsing. When she looked up, her eyes met Ethan's, which were blazing with fury. A sharp pain shot through Hazel's chest, making it difficult to even speak. I didn't do it on purpose. Ethan helped Grace to her feet. He was about to advance on Hazel, his face a mask of rage, when Grace grabbed his arm. She seemed to be in pain, yet she still pleaded on Hazel's behalf. Let it go, Ethan, I understand. It's only natural for her to be upset. I'm fine. Hazel stood there, stunned. What did she mean by that? When she finally understood, she realized this woman was no simpleton. Her hypocritical act was disgusting. Ethan, get out, Hazel was about to explain, but Ethan cut her off with an icy command. His voice boomed with authority. Seeing the disgust and anger on his face, Hazel's heart sank even further. The living room was warm as spring, but she felt as if she were trapped in a frozen wasteland. In the past, he would get angry even at the mention of Grace. Now, with Grace right beside him, Hazel wasn't even allowed to touch her. He was only worried about whether Grace was hurt, but he didn't even notice her own pale face, contorted in pain. In Ethan Sterling's eyes, there was no longer any trace of her. While Hazel was lost in her own sorrow, Ethan had already made a call. Come over and take Hazel to the airport. The call was for Felix. He was sending her away. No, Hazel suddenly shouted. I'm not leaving this city, Ethan. Even if I die, I'll die here. You have no right to control my freedom. Hearing this, Ethan's brow tightened in displeasure. I thought you were a sensible woman. I didn't realize you'd resort to making a scene like this. His cold, heartless taunt was like a blade plunging into Hazel's heart. She stared at the man's dark, angry face, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. Sometime during their argument, it had started to rain outside. The downpour grew heavier, and the sound of it drowned out Hazel's chilling laughter. A coldness swept through her entire body. She had spent 5 years waiting for him without complaint, only to facilitate his unforgettable reunion with someone else, leaving herself with nothing. Making a scene, Hazel's smile was laced with sorrow. Ethan, why should I make things easy for you and someone else? Her eyes welled up. I was with you for 5 years. You think you can just end it whenever you want. My father suffered so much for the sake of my happiness, never uttering a single complaint, and in the end, he died such a miserable death. How can I just end things with you? Ethan's brow furrowed deeply. He had a feeling she was about to say something shocking. Ethan, even if it means torturing each other, I will never let you be free in this lifetime, Hazel declared, each word sharp and clear. Why should I be the one to step aside for you? Why should I be the one to suffer? Tears fell silently down her cheeks. Hazel didn't know how much of what she was saying was just bluster, but at that moment, she was truly on the verge of breaking down. Hazel? Ethan's eyes darkened in disbelief, his gaze filled with disappointment. I thought you were a sensible woman. You know how I feel about Grace. If you truly loved me, you would be happy for my happiness. You would let go, not cling to me like this and make things difficult. Enough! A clap of thunder coincided with Hazel's roar. Her eyes were red as she stared at the man. She had never spoken to Ethan like this before. Even Ethan was stunned into silence. Hazel laughed, a sound full of desolation. She laughed several times. This was the man she had loved for 5 years. She must have been blind to have fallen for him. Please don't fight, Grace interjected, stepping forward to play the role of the bigger person. She gently tried to placate Ethan. I'm fine, just a little dizzy. I'll be okay after some rest. Don't be angry with Hazel because of me. She was with you for 5 years after all. It's understandable that she's upset. As she spoke, she pressed her fingers to her temples, swaying as if about to faint. Ethan, maybe I shouldn't have come back. Her restrained tone and self-reproachful expression perfectly portrayed the image of a wronged victim. Ethan reached out to support her, asking with concern, Are you feeling unwell? Grace shook her head without speaking, but her face screamed, I'm not okay. Watching her act, Hazel felt a bitter frustration. Ethan, I didn't push her on purpose. That's enough, Ethan snapped, his sharp gaze cutting her off. Hazel, I can understand your sadness, but you shouldn't be so vicious. Behaving like this won't bring me back to you. It will only make me resent you more. A series of thunderclaps boomed outside as the rain fell in a frenzy. Hazel clutched her abdomen, a cold sweat breaking out on her forehead. It hadn't been long since her abortion. Perhaps this time had been particularly hard on her body because she hadn't felt well for days. The recent impact had sent waves of pain through her, making her tremble. Felix rushed in from the main entrance, clearly in a hurry. Mr. Sterling, Ethan's brow was deeply creased. He didn't spare Hazel another glance, only saying indifferently, Take her away. Hearing his words, Hazel's eyes widened in a vacant stare. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. It was raining so hard. Could he really be so heartless? Miss Palmer, Felix approached her hesitantly, prompting her. Hazel bit her lips so hard, she didn't realize she had drawn blood. Her voice cut through the noise in the room as she asked him, Ethan, let me ask you one last time. Did you ever love me? Her 5 years deserved some kind of answer. If he had even a shred of affection for her, he couldn't possibly be so cruel. Ethan's face was turned away, his expression unreadable. After a moment, his voice came out, cold and flat. No? The clap of thunder outside made Hazel stumble, and tears finally broke free, streaming down her face. She asked again, her voice choked, not even a little bit. Felix, get her out of here. This time, Ethan didn't even bother to answer. He seemed desperate to get rid of her, like shaking off a beggar or an object he no longer wanted. His annoyance was written all over his face. Miss Palmer, that won't be necessary. Hazel's eyes were red-rimmed, but she didn't cry out. She defiantly held her head high, clinging to the last shred of her pride. I can walk out myself. She turned and walked, step by step, out of this house, the place she had called home for 5 years. Everything she had thought was hers had, in an instant, become nothing but a dream. The rain was pouring down. As Hazel stepped out of the villa, she was instantly drenched, looking like a lost soul in the dark night. The wind whipped around her mercilessly, but she seemed to feel nothing. She couldn't feel the cold, or perhaps she was already frozen to the core. She didn't look back, forcing herself to keep moving forward, even as the stabbing pain in her abdomen became unbearable, even as her vision blurred. At the villa's entrance, Ethan silently watched her disappearing figure. He had always known how fragile that slender frame was, but his face showed no emotion, as cold and resolute as an unfeeling monster. Felix didn't dare speak at a time like this, but he finally asked timidly, "Mr. Sterling, should I still take Miss Palmer to the airport?" "Let her be," Ethan said coldly, turning and walking back into the living room. In the upstairs bedroom, Ethan had been staring out at the downpour for a full hour. His handsome face was hidden in the shadows, his thoughts unreadable. Grace pressed her lips together, her expression darkening. After a moment, she composed herself and put on a gentle smile. She approached him from behind and wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her cheek against his back. "Ethan, why aren't you in bed yet?" Ethan lit a cigarette with a click, exhaling a cloud of smoke. "You go ahead, the rain's too loud, I can't sleep." "Ethan," Grace whispered shyly, "I can't sleep either." "Why don't we?" "Grace." Ethan turned, one hand resting on the small of her back. He looked down at her. "You haven't fully recovered yet, you need to rest." Grace's smile froze. She managed another awkward laugh, not having expected him to reject her like this. "Actually, I'm much better now. I've been recovering for the past 5 years. Before I came back, my doctor told me I could." "You can't be careless with your health," Ethan interrupted, gently kissing her forehead. "I've waited 5 years. I don't mind waiting a little longer." So he was just worried about her health. He really did still love her. Grace hugged him, relieved, but her smile vanished just as quickly. Resting her head on his chest, she asked tentatively, "Are you worried about Hazel?" Ethan's fingers tightened on his cigarette. He took a drag, his tone indifferent. "No." Even though he said that, a woman's intuition is a powerful thing. Grace gritted her teeth, her eyes growing darker. It seemed that until that woman was dealt with, Ethan Sterling would never be completely hers. She had endured for 5 years, planned for 5 years. She couldn't afford any mistakes now. Hazel didn't know how she managed to walk back. She lay in bed for days, burning with a frighteningly high fever. When she finally opened her eyes, she saw her mother, Catherine, bustling around, wiping her forehead with a damp cloth. "Mom," she tried to sit up but was too weak and fell back onto the pillow. "Don't move." Seeing her awake, Catherine's eyes filled with tears, but she tried to sound nonchalant as she scolded her. "Look at you, lying here for days. You finally come back, and it's just to scare me. I'm an old woman, Hazel. I can't take scares like this." Hazel's temples were still throbbing. She frowned. "How did I get here?" She couldn't remember much about that night. "You have the nerve to ask," Catherine huffed, giving her a look. "It was barely dawn, and you were knocking on the door, crying for your mom. Luckily, I'm a light sleeper. When I opened the door, I nearly had a heart attack. It had been pouring all night, and you didn't even have an umbrella. Who knows where you lost your shoes? You were standing there barefoot, soaked to the bone, looking less than human. And your hands, they were like blocks of ice, completely numb, I bet." As she spoke, fragments of memory returned to Hazel. She had walked for miles before the reality of Ethan's cruelty finally sank in. She had tried to hail a cab, but in the pouring rain, at that hour, with no money, she hadn't seen a single one. Her high heels had rubbed her feet raw, so she had taken them off and walked barefoot in the freezing rainwater, with nowhere to go. In the end, she had subconsciously made her way here. And then you started running a fever, a terrifyingly high one. I couldn't move you to the hospital on my own. I had to call Dr. Kingsley to come and help." Hazel paused. "Dr. Kingsley?" "That's right," Catherine said, glancing at her with what seemed like deliberate emphasis. "Simon Kingsley. The eldest son of the Kingsley family, the one you grew up with." Simon Kingsley. Oh, she had heard he became a doctor. Hazel turned her gaze to the window. She and Simon were practically childhood sweethearts. She had always known about his feelings for her, but then she met Ethan, and that potential relationship ended before it even began. She had heard rumors about him over the years, but had never asked for details. "He's still single, you know," Catherine added, clearly trying to make a point. Hazel pretended not to hear, patting her stomach and changing the subject. "Mom, I'm hungry." Over the next few days, Hazel remained withdrawn and sullen. She never brought up Ethan, but news about him was constantly in their faces on TV, in the newspapers, online. Several times, she saw her mother secretly wiping away tears in the living room, only to put on a cheerful smile the moment she saw Hazel, as if nothing was wrong. Hazel knew that her mother was the one most hurt by how things had ended between her and Ethan. In truth, when she had decided to come back to see them, she had lost the will to live. With no family and no love, the thought of going to a faraway place all by herself was unbearable. She would rather have died in front of Ethan, just to experience what it felt like to be remembered by him. But then, learning of her father's death, the fear of leaving her mother all alone had extinguished any thoughts of suicide. Her mother was all she had left. Hazel thought things had finally settled down. She still felt a pang of sadness seeing news about Ethan, but she was determined to move on. But she never expected to see the announcement of Ethan's wedding so soon. The ceremony was just 7 days away. And what she expected even less was the call she received from the police station that afternoon, informing her that her mother had been arrested for attempted murder. Hazel rushed to the station. Her mother, Catherine, was terrified, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "Hazel, I didn't kill anyone, tell them." Her mother had never experienced anything like this in her life. The word murder was something she wouldn't even dare to think about. She didn't understand the law and was probably convinced that a murder charge meant a death sentence. And even if it was just prison, she would be terrified. Hazel knew her mother better than anyone. She stood up. "Officer, there must be a misunderstanding. My mom wouldn't kill anyone." Before she could finish, she saw Ethan walk in, dressed in a dark, slightly disheveled suit. A shocking splash of bright red blood stained his white shirt. Hazel was stunned. She looked back at her mother. Had she gone to find Ethan? "Mr. Sterling." An officer went to brief him on the situation. The words swam in and out of Hazel's hearing. She finally grasped the gist of it. The injured person was Grace. Hazel felt a wave of helplessness. Ethan was standing right in front of her but didn't even glance her way. He was radiating a cold, dark fury, his lips pressed into a thin line. He hadn't said a word, but Hazel could feel that he was on the verge of exploding. By the time Hazel came to her senses, Ethan was already leaving. Panic seized her, and she hurried after him. "Ethan," the man stopped but didn't turn around. Hazel reached out and grabbed the hem of his jacket, her voice trembling. "This has to be a misunderstanding. You know what my mom is like, she would never kill anyone." "Hazel," Ethan said, his voice frigid. He turned his head slightly, his gaze finally landing on her face. He let her see the blood on his shirt, his Adam's apple bobbing. "This blood doesn't lie. If I hadn't arrived in time, Grace might have died." "Impossible, that's impossible." Hazel shook her head, her eyes wide with disbelief. "It must have been Grace, she framed my mom, she must have." "Hazel," Ethan's eyes narrowed in disappointment. "Wrong is wrong. Just because she's your mother doesn't give you the right to slander Grace." Hazel's fingers suddenly lost their strength, then clenched again as she desperately tried to explain. "It has to be Grace, she's not as gentle and kind as you think that time at the villa. She fell on purpose." Her words died in her throat as Ethan brushed her hand away. His tall frame stood before her like a mountain, pressing down on her until she could barely breathe. "Hazel, if it were you, would you use your own face to frame an elder you were meeting for the first time?" Hazel was stunned, not understanding what he meant. Ethan's throat worked for a moment before he said coldly, "Grace's face is ruined." Ruined. Hazel stood frozen, only snapping out of it when she heard Ethan's retreating footsteps. She grabbed his arm, her voice breaking into a desperate plea. "Let my mom go. She's old, she can't go to prison. Losing my dad was already a huge blow to her. She can't go to prison." "Hazel." Ethan's warm fingertips brushed against her cheek, his eyes deep and unreadable. "When you do something wrong, you have to pay the price. You know my rules." Yes, she knew. In the business world, Ethan Sterling was known for his ruthless methods, his clear distinction between reward and punishment. But the thought made Hazel's heart turn to ice, and all she wanted to do was laugh. To him, her father, her mother, they were no different from his business partners. They meant nothing to him. Hazel had questioned her mother, Catherine. Her mother said Grace had asked to meet her. She had been furious about Ethan abandoning Hazel, so she had argued with Grace. Things had somehow escalated into a physical struggle, and the next thing she knew, Grace was on the floor, her face covered in blood, screaming. After hearing the whole story, Hazel couldn't be sure if her mother, in a fit of rage, had acted without realizing it. After all, Grace's face was ruined. No woman would gamble with her own face. But when she saw Grace, her perspective shifted dramatically. "You're here." Grace seemed completely unsurprised, showing none of the pain one would expect. Hazel remembered her purpose. She stepped forward. "I came to ask you to let my mom go. As long as she doesn't go to prison, whatever compensation you want, I'll do my best to provide it." "Compensation?" Grace sneered. Half her face was wrapped in bandages, but her aggressive demeanor was undiminished. "What do you think I need? Money? Ethan has plenty. A man? Ethan is marrying me in a few days. What do you think you have that I don't?" Grace looked at her provocatively. "Even that face of yours is just a substitute for mine." Hazel's shoulders tensed. She swallowed the urge to argue back, forcing herself into a humbler posture. "You're right, you have everything now. You've always been the only one in Ethan's heart. Since you're getting married, could you please be merciful and let my mom go?" "Why should I be merciful?" Grace raised an eyebrow, a disdainful smile on her lips. "I gambled my face to ensure you and your mother would never recover from this. Do you really think I'd let her off so easily?" Hazel's brow furrowed. "What do you mean by that?" Grace smirked but didn't answer directly. Hazel, however, had already guessed most of it. She moved closer, her voice filled with disbelief. "You really did frame my mom, didn't you?" "Watch your tone," Grace said, pushing her away with a fingertip. She leaned back against the headboard, crossing her arms. "You're the one begging me right now. If you're going to beg, you should act like it." Hazel clenched her fists, suppressing the rage that threatened to consume her. What good would it do even if she knew the truth? All the evidence pointed to her mother being guilty of attempted murder. She had no choice but to beg Grace. For her mother, she would endure any humiliation. "What will it take for you to let my mom go?" "It's not impossible." Grace raised an eyebrow, her eyes narrowing with a triumphant, sinister glint. "Kneel and beg me. Maybe then I'll consider it." Kneel. So Grace's only goal was to humiliate her. If that was the case, she would kneel. Without a moment's hesitation, Hazel dropped to the floor with a thud. The impact sent a sharp pain through her knees, but she gritted her teeth. "Is this enough?" "Ha, Hazel," I pleaded with Ethan, "but he wouldn't let your mother go. You should realize by now how much he despises you both and how much he cares about me. He's going to marry me on schedule, even with my injured face. And you can go die with that stupid mother of yours. Grace, you..." Before she could finish, Grace's expression shifted to one of panic. "Hazel, don't force me like this. I'm not the one who convicted your mother. I've already pleaded with Ethan for her. Please stop pressuring me." Hazel looked up, bewildered. Just then, she heard the hospital room door being thrown open with a bang. Heavy, rapid footsteps approached, and she was violently yanked up by the collar of her shirt. "What are you doing?" It was Ethan. His furious question roared in her ear. Hazel was barely on her feet, the collar choking her until she could hardly breathe. "Ethan, forget it." Grace scrambled out of bed, grabbing his arm and pleading with tears streaming down her face. "Why don't you just let her mother go? As for my face, just pretend I cut it myself. She wasn't trying to kill me. It was my fault." Ethan's eyes darkened. He shoved Hazel aside and bent down to carry Grace back to the bed, murmuring softly, "You need to rest." Then, he grabbed Hazel and dragged her out of the room. Hazel stumbled behind him, tears blurring her vision, but she stubbornly refused to let them fall. When they reached a corner in the hallway, Ethan finally let her go. He slammed a hand against the wall next to her head, his cold fingers closing around her neck, pinning her in place. "Hazel, what the hell do you want, huh?" Ethan's eyes were bloodshot. Hazel gasped for air, her face turning red. Even coughing was a struggle. The tears she had been holding back finally streamed down her face. She let out a hoarse laugh, a beautiful, tragic expression on her face. Ethan frowned, his anger flaring even hotter. "What do I want?" Hazel finally broke free from his grasp, clutching her throat and coughing relentlessly until she couldn't stop crying. Her laughter was wild and brilliant. It should be, what do you want? She blinked away the stinging pain in her eyes. I had already decided to give up. Why won't you just leave me alone? You know my mother is all I have left, yet you're so heartless you'd send her to prison. She brought it on herself. Ethan's lips thinned into a cold line. Besides, Grace has already pleaded for her and has done everything she can to get her sentence reduced. Why do you still have to go and harass her? Harass. He thought that her kneeling on the floor, begging Grace, was harassing her. Hazel couldn't help but laugh coldly. Ethan, when did you become so blind? When did your heart become so blind? What if I told you that Grace was the one who framed my mom? Hazel stared intently into his eyes. Who would you believe, her or me? Ethan's eyes were cold. He was silent for a long time before finally turning away, his back a lonely silhouette. I'll hire the best lawyer for you to try and get a few years off your mother's sentence. Listening to his retreating footsteps, Hazel threw her head back and laughed. Should she be thanking them for their mercy and compassion? Over the next few days, Hazel barely ate. Simon Kingsley came by several times, using his connections to help with her mother's case. Hazel wanted to get her mother out on bail first. Her mother had never endured much hardship. She wouldn't be able to handle the dark, damp conditions of a prison, either mentally or physically. But in the early hours of the morning on Ethan's wedding day, Hazel received a notification. Her mother had suffered a heart attack. Resuscitation efforts had failed. She was dead. In that moment, her world went black. In the grand ballroom of a 5-star hotel, the wedding was about to begin. The guests were all prominent figures, and the event was the talk of the town. Ethan, dressed in a sharp suit, stood before a full-length mirror, but his face showed none of the joy expected of a groom. Mr. Sterling, Felix Asher burst in. It's bad, what is it? Ethan frowned, unconcerned, as he fumbled with his tie, which he couldn't seem to get right. Felix's frantic entrance only added to his irritation. Felix swallowed hard before stammering, I just got word. Mrs. Palmer has passed away. Ethan froze. After a long moment, he looked at him. What did you say? Mrs. Palmer had a heart attack and passed away, Felix said, his voice barely a whisper. Also, the investigation you requested. We have a lead. There was a witness who testified that Miss Caldwell's injuries were not caused by Mrs. Palmer. Before Felix could finish, Ethan had ripped off his tie and was storming out of the room. Felix called after him, Mr. Sterling, the wedding is about to start. To hell with it, a roar echoed back as the man disappeared down the hall. At the hospital, Hazel sat on a bench, perfectly still, as if all life had been drained from her. Her hands and feet were ice cold. The hospital corridor felt like a living hell. Tears fell, one by one, onto the back of her hand. From this day on, she had no father, no mother, no Ethan, and she would never have children. For the rest of her life, she would be alone. Hazel, Simon Kingsley, having taken care of the necessary arrangements, rushed over. Seeing her lonely figure, his heart ached. He knelt beside her, rubbing her hands to give her some warmth. Don't be so sad. Your mother wouldn't want to see you like this. Hazel cried silently, a fierce glint gradually appearing in her empty eyes. She shot to her feet. She couldn't let her mother's murderers get away with it, an eye for an eye she would make them pay. Hazel, don't do this. Simon guessed what she was planning and wrapped his arms around her, but Hazel's eyes were already red with fury. After a brief, desperate struggle, Hazel let out a tragic, hoarse cry. Simon held her tightly. Hazel, don't be afraid, you still have me. Simon, Hazel's voice was a choked sob as she clutched his collar. My mother is dead. When Ethan arrived, he saw a man and a woman locked in an embrace. His concern instantly turned into a dark, raging fire. He strode forward and forcefully pulled Hazel away. He shot Simon a cold glare, then looked down to speak to Hazel. But before he could, Hazel slapped him hard across the face. How dare he show up? The sting in Hazel's palm was sharp. She pressed her lips together, staring at the man with pure hatred. What are you doing here? To see how miserable I am? Or to confirm that my mother is really dead so you can appease your precious darling? Ethan's eyes darkened. He was clearly displeased with her tone, but seeing her swollen, red-rimmed eyes, his voice softened instantly. I came to see you. He reflexively raised his hand, intending to wipe away the tear tracks on her cheeks, but Hazel coldly dodged his touch. Hazel didn't need it. She didn't need his fake concern. He and Grace were both murderers. Get out, The word hit Ethan like a physical blow. He never thought she would dare to say that to him. "Mr. Sterling, please leave," Simon said, stepping forward to shield Hazel, his tone unapologetic. Ethan looked between the two of them and couldn't help but sneer. He had heard she had a childhood sweetheart who was madly in love with her. So this was the man? The way they held each other looked so familiar. They must have practiced it many times. "You claim to love me, but how long have we been apart? And you're already in another man's arms, especially at a time like this. Isn't that a bit inappropriate?" Hazel stared at him in disbelief. "Ethan Sterling, you bastard, I'm a bastard." Ethan grabbed her wrist fiercely. "So now you think I'm a bastard. What, you think this childhood sweetheart of yours is more of a gentleman?" Before Ethan could finish, Simon's fist connected with his face. He stumbled back, steadying himself against the wall. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth with his other hand and let out a sudden laugh. "Ethan Sterling, I won't let you insult Hazel." Simon's eyes were bloodshot. "And in what capacity are you ordering me around?" Ethan straightened up, taking 2 long strides forward to confront him, his presence instantly overwhelming. Simon had to admit this man was superior to him in every way: looks, power, status. That was why he had stood by and watched as Hazel threw herself into his arms all those years ago. All he could do was let go. But now, he couldn't leave Hazel in the hands of a man like this. "Well, Mr. Kingsley?" Ethan's lips curved into a provocative smirk. "What right do you have to speak to me like that? Or has she already become your woman?" Ethan Sterling, this time, before Simon could make a move, Hazel slapped him again, with all the strength she had left. Ethan's eyes turned black. After a long moment, he looked up. She had actually hit him for another man. Rage shot through him. He seized her wrist. Simon, panicked, rushed forward to intervene. The 3 of them struggled until Hazel's scream echoed through the entire corridor. Enough, Hazel's heart was so weary. She looked at Ethan, exhausted. "I was wrong, Ethan. Loving you was my own doing, my own punishment. I'll pay for my own sins, but my parents, they didn't deserve to die so miserably." Her voice trembled. Ethan's hand fell empty as he watched her walk away like a soulless ghost. A lump formed in Ethan's throat, and his heart felt hollow. His eyes, too, were empty. The woman who had always followed him, the woman he couldn't seem to shake. It seemed like this time she was really leaving. He didn't feel relieved. On the contrary, his feet felt as heavy as lead, his heart so heavy he couldn't breathe. He never showed up for the wedding. The venue descended into chaos. When Ethan returned to the Sterling estate, his father, Theodore, was sitting in the living room, his face a thundercloud. His mother, Alina, was there too, and Grace, still in her white wedding gown, was sitting on the sofa. Seeing him return, Grace's disappointed expression softened slightly. "So you decided to come back?" Theodore's face was contorted with rage. Alina tried to calm him down, playing the peacemaker. "Let's hear our son's explanation first. Don't be so quick to get angry." At that, Grace also managed a smile, speaking up for Ethan and showcasing her own maturity. "Dad, I'm sure Ethan had something important to do, which is why he had to leave so suddenly. Our love hasn't been easy. The fact that he was willing to wait 5 years for me is proof enough of his feelings." She stood up, walked over to Ethan, and took his arm, looking up at him and asking gently, "Ethan, did something happen?" Ethan looked down, his gaze meeting hers. His eyes were nearly black. Grace's smile faltered. In the next moment, her arms were empty as Ethan pulled away and walked forward. She stood there, stunned and a little surprised. Ethan's reaction. It was as if he was disgusted by her. "I had something urgent come up." An important wedding like this, and you just dismiss it with something urgent. "Do you have any idea who was here today? You've made me the laughingstock of the entire city." Ethan pressed his lips together. A storm was brewing inside him, but he forced it down, not saying a word of what was on his mind. Alina, sensing the tension between father and son, quickly stood up. "All right, Ethan, you must be tired. Go get some rest. You have to understand your father. This wedding affects the entire Sterling family's reputation and the company's development for the next 6 months. You know better than anyone the kind of damage a stunt like this can cause." Yes, Ethan knew. He knew the consequences of the wedding not proceeding as planned. But the moment he heard Hazel was in trouble, he hadn't thought about any of that. He had just left. Ethan sat on the sofa by the French windows for what must have been an hour or two, swirling the red wine in his glass, his thoughts a chaotic mess. He had thought his feelings for Hazel were just a form of projection, a substitute. But why was it that, at every critical moment, he couldn't bring himself to be ruthless with her? Ethan, Grace, now changed into a nightgown, entered the room, the scent of her perfume filling the air. She leaned against his shoulder, a silent invitation, but Ethan frowned. He didn't like this perfume. It was too strong. Ethan, Grace wrapped her arms around his neck. Today was our wedding day. This is our wedding night. I've dreamed of this day for so many years. She began to unbutton his shirt one by one. Ethan stopped her hand and then pulled her away. Grace stood beside him, flustered and confused. Have you ever lied to me? Ethan stood up, his eyes boring into hers. Grace was taken aback, then gave an awkward laugh. Ethan, what are you talking about? Why would I ever lie to you? Ethan's scrutinizing gaze made Grace inexplicably nervous. In the end, Ethan didn't say anything more. But he didn't sleep in the room that night. For the next several days, he didn't show up at all. Grace panicked. Nothing was going according to her plan. One day, she saw Ethan at Catherine Palmer's funeral. He walked in, dressed in black, only to be blocked by Hazel. The guests were shocked. The funeral had been arranged by Simon Kingsley, who was acting almost as a son-in-law. Hazel had cried herself sick, to the point of being delirious, leaving Simon to handle everything. It was true. Hazel had knelt in front of her mother's memorial for days, barely eating or drinking. She had fainted from crying several times, and it was only Simon's timely IV drips that had brought her around. The sight of Ethan seemed to jolt Hazel back to life. She lunged at him, clawing at his chest, her voice hoarse. What are you doing here? What are you doing here? What right do you have to show your face here? She asked him over and over, her red, swollen eyes fixed on him, filled with a bottomless hatred. Ethan looked at her grief-stricken face and grabbed her hands. But Hazel sank her teeth into the fleshy part of his hand between his thumb and forefinger, biting down hard, and not letting go. She was finally pulled away by relatives, all her rage spent. I'm sorry. Ethan's voice was low, but Hazel heard it. Sorry? Was sorry going to fix anything? Hazel couldn't even laugh. Tears streamed down her face as she did, and at that moment she saw another woman walking in Grace. The despair in her eyes turned into a bloodthirsty rage. She lunged forward but was held back by several people. Simon knew exactly what she was planning. Simon walked up to Grace. Please leave. You don't belong here. A faint, disdainful smile flickered across Grace's lips before she quickly masked it. She bit her lip, looking wronged, and glanced at Ethan. Her meaning was clear. She was here out of generosity and mercy as the victim. Ethan's brow remained furrowed. He didn't linger, walking past her and out of the building. Grace hurried after him. Ethan got into his car, and Grace followed closely behind. Suddenly, her wrist was grabbed. In the next second, a knife plunged deep into her lower back. The person holding the knife was Hazel. Ethan's eyes widened in horror. He shoved Hazel away and caught Grace as she fell, his gaze fixed on the blood pouring from the wound, a sea of red. He looked at Hazel in disbelief, never imagining she would actually try to kill someone. Ethan, Grace clutched his arm, her eyes wide with terror, crying out in pain. Ethan, save me. Save me. Ethan tore his gaze from Hazel's face and, without a word, lifted Grace into his arms and got into the car. His final look at Hazel was met with a wild, crazed laugh. The car sped away, leaving Hazel behind. Hazel laughed until she couldn't stop the tears. Ethan must be heartbroken. Would Grace be so lucky as to survive this time? If she died, then Ethan could experience that feeling of despair all over again. And this time, hopefully, he would be doomed for eternity. Then I can die in peace, Hazel. Simon ran out and snatched the dagger from her hand. Hazel's vision went black, and the strength that had been holding her up for days finally gave out. Hazel had been in custody for a week. Simon was beside himself with worry, but he was powerless. She had confessed to trying to kill Grace. No excuses, no defense. Is Grace dead? Every time he visited, she asked the same question. Simon answered truthfully. She hasn't woken up yet. Hazel sneered. Good. Let Ethan spend the rest of his life watching over a vegetable. That was good too. Simon, don't come here anymore. I can't just leave you. Simon's position was clear. I'll find the best lawyer for you. As long as you cooperate, you'll be out soon. Hazel laughed coldly. Out for what? The world outside was cold and empty. It was warmer in here. "Hazel, you can't go on like this." Simon sensed that something was wrong with her. At first, he thought it was just grief over her mother's death, but now he could see that her mental state had severely deteriorated. Or rather, she had trapped herself in a dark corner and refused to come out. "Just go," Hazel said, hugging herself tighter. "Don't come back. Hazel, you're not all alone. You still have me." Simon looked at her earnestly. "I've been waiting for you. From the first day I met you, I knew you were the one I wanted to spend my life with." Hazel knew. She had always known. And because of that, she had finally come to understand that some things just can't be forced. If she had realized that sooner, if she had escaped Ethan's vortex earlier, would things have turned out differently? But it was too late. The damage was done. She had indirectly caused the deaths of her own parents. Even if she died, she could never atone for such a sin. She didn't want to live anymore. Living was so tiring. What was there to live for? No parents, no lover, no children. How was she supposed to live out the rest of her life? She wished someone could give her an answer, but it was no use. Her mind was still filled with thoughts of Ethan. That was what was driving her insane. To know something is wrong, yet to be unable to let it go. She was going to be driven mad by her own mind. "Simon, the person I am now. I'm not worthy of you anymore. You're still you. You've always been the Hazel I know." Hazel didn't respond. She simply stood up and left. Over the next few days, Simon continued to visit. Finally, one day, his answer changed. He said, Grace woke up. The thread of tension that had been holding Hazel together snapped. A coldness seeped into her heart, draining her of the last bit of strength that had been sustaining her. A few days later, Grace came to visit. She sat across from Hazel, a triumphant smile on her face. "You wanted to kill me, but fate wouldn't let me die. In the end, Hazel, you still lost." Hazel's lips curved into a desolate smile. Was even fate so unfair? "I came to tell you that for this charge of attempted murder, you'll be serving at least 5 years in prison." Grace leaned forward, her eyebrows raised in a taunting expression. "By the time you get out, my child will probably be all grown up. What will you have to compete with me then?" Hazel's hands clenched, her eyes turning bloodshot. "Grace, you'll get what you deserve." "What I deserve?" Grace laughed out loud. "I've never believed in karma. 5 years ago, the Sterling family looked down on my humble background and refused to let Ethan marry me. I had no choice but to stage an accident to make him feel guilty. He thought it was his parents' pressure that made me want to kill myself. I knew exactly how he would react, so I gambled 5 years. When I came back, all it took was one lie, and he believed my accident was just an accident. And because he hadn't married for 5 years, his parents were getting desperate. So now, when he wants to marry me, they don't object. Hazel, you should know just how ruthless I can be with myself." Grace brought her half-injured face closer. "To make Ethan forget you completely, I was willing to sacrifice half my face to deepen his guilt and to turn you two into mortal enemies." But don't worry." Hazel watched in shock as she peeled away the gauze. Grace was clearly pleased with her reaction. She smiled. "When the time is right, I'll tell him my face has healed. Then I can stand by his side perfectly while you'll just be a murderer." "Grace," Hazel shot up from her seat, slamming her hands on the table, but she couldn't touch her. Grace just smirked, stood up, and looked at her provocatively. "And I have you to thank for this little stab wound." I was starting to feel like his attitude toward me was getting a little strange. "But because of what you did, he's been doting on me again." Do you know what he said to me? He said even if you were executed by firing squad, you would have gotten what you deserved. Grace left. Hazel stood frozen, her vision blurring. To him, whether she lived or died, did it really not matter at all? Ethan stared at the photos spread across the table. If someone hadn't secretly recorded a video, he would never have known the truth. The photos clearly showed what had happened. The injury to Grace's face was just a self-inflicted ploy. But the doctor had told him her face was ruined. There was only one possibility. She and the doctor had conspired to deceive him. Veins bulged on his forehead. This was the woman he had felt guilty about for 5 years? Ethan threw the stack of photos at Grace's face. Explain. Grace's legs went weak, and she grabbed the edge of the table for support. Then she rushed to him, hugging him and trying to explain. "Ethan, I'm sorry I lied, but she really did come looking for me. She said I had stolen her daughter's man and that she was going to kill me. That part is true, I didn't lie about that. Before she could finish, Ethan had pushed her away. His profile was cold and hard, his eyes hidden in shadow, filled with self-reproach and regret. Mrs. Palmer is dead. Hazel has no one left. All because of your lie. After speaking the cold words, the man's lips clamped shut, his entire body radiating a chilling aura. Grace, however, bit her lip and after a moment said with a surprising lack of fear, "Ethan, you can't blame this all on me. You're responsible too. Her death was caused by both of us. We're both to blame. I did lie, but if you hadn't insisted on pursuing the matter, she wouldn't have died. I did plead for her, you know." Grace was too smart. She knew that once the truth was out, she could drag Ethan down with her. And the fact was, she had pleaded for Catherine, and he had been the one who refused to let it go. He was the one who had caused the final outcome. In the end, he was the one who had caused Catherine Palmer's death. He and Hazel were already enemies, that was a fact. Ethan, let it go. What's done is done. It's a mistake, but no one can change it. Let's not dwell on it anymore, okay? Ethan felt as if he didn't even know the woman in front of him anymore. How could she say something like that? How cold-blooded and ruthless could she be? But the truth was, he was the main culprit. He was the one who had caused all of this. Remembering how Hazel had begged him to believe her, Ethan's heart twisted in pain. How desperate must she have been? He couldn't bear to think about it anymore. Ethan stormed out of the room. Grace tried to call him back, but he was already gone. Her hands and feet turned to ice. What was he going to do? No, this couldn't happen. She had schemed for so long. She couldn't fall short at the last moment. Her phone rang. She answered it and heard the threat from the other end. Her eyes widened. "What do you want from me? I just married Ethan. I haven't gotten a single cent yet. How am I supposed to get you the money?" After hanging up, she swept the photos off the table. If she couldn't win Ethan over, the person on the other end would expose her secrets, and then she would be left with nothing. Ethan wanted to see Hazel. But this time, the response he got wasn't that she refused to see him, but that she was dead. This morning, she ran headfirst into a wall. She lost a lot of blood. They rushed her to the hospital for emergency treatment, but they just notified us that she died from excessive blood loss. A buzzing sound filled Ethan's ears. He stood there, stunned, unsure of where to go. Only 2 words echoed in his mind: she's dead. He had never imagined this day would come. She was dead. In that instant, the world turned black and white. Everyone who passed by was a gray blur. All color had vanished from his eyes. He saw Hazel's body. She lay there, still and silent. Her eyes were closed, as if she were asleep. Ethan thought back to the many times they had spent together. She was always so well-behaved when she slept, always wanting to curl up in his arms. She said she liked the sound of his heartbeat, thumping steadily, making her feel safe and grounded. Her hands and feet were always cold. She would playfully stick them inside his shirt, and he would never pull away, always warming them for her. She would laugh, so happy. She said she liked the feeling of being cherished by him. Now she was lying here, her whole body radiating a chilling cold. Ethan hugged her, holding her tightly in his arms, but he couldn't warm her up. And her heartbeat, why couldn't he hear it anymore? Panic seized Ethan. He was scared. For the first time in his life, he was speechless, unable to make a sound. He wanted to cry, but no tears would come. "Hazel! Hazel!" He called her name over and over, but he heard no reply. In a daze, he seemed to see Hazel standing not far away, turning back to give him a brilliant smile. "My name is Hazel. What's yours?" His memory drifted back to the first time they met. At the time, Ethan and Lawrence Palmer were business partners. After a meeting, Ethan had been heading out when he collided with Hazel right outside the elevator. The moment she looked up, her smile was radiant enough to melt glaciers. "Sorry about that. I bumped into you," Hazel said cheekily, wiping a smear of ice cream from his chest with her finger. Ethan's tightly furrowed brow gradually relaxed. He just stood there, captivated. Hazel walked past him, heading forward with a cheerful bounce in her step. Suddenly, she turned and called out, "Hey, my name is Hazel. What's yours?" Ethan would never forget that moment. She was standing in the sunlight, pulling him, bit by bit, out of the darkness. Thinking back now, he wasn't even sure if it was her face or her sunny smile that had drawn him in. When she later threw herself at him, he hadn't refused. That night, it was pouring rain. She stood outside the villa, drenched like a stray cat, looking at him with pitiful eyes. "Ethan Sterling, I want to be your woman." Right now, the young girl, full of passion, had run toward him, with no thought for the consequences or the future. Hazel found his lips. "Kiss me." "Ethan, kiss me." It was as if she was burning all her bridges, wanting nothing more than to spend her life with him. Ethan hadn't refused. He carried her upstairs and kicked open the bedroom door. Ethan had been gentle, asking softly if it hurt. She had bravely shaken her head, tears silently soaking into the pillow. He had frowned, asking, "Why are you crying?" "I'm just so happy," she had said, looking out the window, but her sobs wouldn't stop. He had held her in his arms, gently coaxing her until she finally confessed the truth. "My dad forbids me from dating you. He told me never to see you again. I won't do it, Ethan. I'm going to cling to you for the rest of my life. I'm your woman now. No one can separate us." At the time, Lawrence Palmer's appreciation for Ethan was limited to his professional abilities. No one wanted a ruthless son-in-law, especially not a father who doted on his daughter. Later, Lawrence had slapped Hazel. It was the first time in her life he had ever hit her. Hazel had cried, stubbornly refusing to break up with Ethan. Eventually, she had simply moved in with him. Not long after, she became pregnant with their first child. Ethan had told her she was still young, that there would be plenty of opportunities later. That time, Hazel had cried for a long time. Hazel had gone back to see her father a few times after that, but their mutual stubbornness only drove them further apart. Eventually, her visits became rare, and when she did go back, she would only sneak a peek at her father before leaving again. The more she felt she was in the wrong, the less she knew how to face him. Perhaps that was Hazel's state of mind in the years that followed. Ethan would never forget the sweet way she used to call him Ethan. But when had that happy, joyful expression started to fade? She must have been utterly devastated to choose to leave him, to leave this world. "No, she's not dead." Ethan bent down, scooped her up into his arms, and strode toward the door. Someone tried to stop him. "Mr. Sterling." He shot them a cold look, and Felix Asher quickly stepped in to handle it. Ethan took her home, to the place where they had lived for 5 years. Walking into the living room, he looked at the new furniture and decor and found it incredibly jarring. He could finally understand how she must have felt when she first saw the changes. It must have been excruciatingly painful. But why was it only now that he realized this house was better the way it was before? Ethan Grace ran down the stairs. When she saw Hazel's body, she stumbled back several steps in horror and leaned over the railing, gagging. Ethan frowned and walked past her, holding Hazel, his expression icy. Grace called out frantically, "Ethan, what are you doing? Where are you taking that dead body?" Ethan paused, his voice cold. "She is not a dead body. She's not dead. She's alive and well." With that, he carried Hazel's body upstairs. Grace stared after him, her eyes wide with terror. Had Ethan gone mad? Perhaps he had. He laid Hazel on the bed, pulled the covers over her, and then lay down beside her, holding her tightly in his arms. "Are you still cold?" he asked, a faint smile on his lips. He suddenly remembered Hazel telling him he didn't smile enough, that he was always so cold. He should have smiled more. Maybe then she would have felt warmer. "Ethan, why don't you ever smile?" Hazel had asked him once, grinning. "But it's okay. That way when you do smile, it makes me so happy." He had never told her that he didn't know how to smile. From a young age, he had been exposed to the complexities of human relationships and had never known true happiness. Perhaps the only times he felt happy were when he closed a deal or completed a task. But the 5 years he spent with her were actually the most relaxed and joyful of his life. He had never told her. Yes, he had never said it. The person in his arms was so cold. That was Ethan's first thought. Hazel was cold. She had told him she hated the cold. For the first time, Ethan felt a sense of powerless despair. He kissed her cheek. "Hazel, wake up." But she slept so soundly. Not long after, the bedroom door was pushed open. A sudden burst of light stung Ethan's eyes. His father, Theodore, stormed in, his face livid. "What is this nonsense you're pulling?" As he spoke, he ordered his men to take Hazel's body away. Ethan reacted instinctively, trying to stop them. His mother, Eleanor, tearfully held him back. "Son, don't scare me like this. Please don't scare your mother." Ethan watched helplessly as they took Hazel away. He stood there, powerless, his world not just black and white, but completely dark. He could finally understand. When she had lost everything, had she felt like this too? Ethan Sterling had never cried in his life. but for the first time, tears fell from his eyes. "Grace, you keep an eye on him. Don't let him do anything crazy again," Theodore commanded coldly before turning and leaving. Grace finally felt like she had the situation under control. She cautiously approached Ethan. "Ethan, I know you're very sad, but you can't bring the dead back to life. You're the one who let them take Hazel away," Ethan said, his eyes bloodshot. Grace timidly took a small step back. This was the first time she had seen him like this. "She's already dead." "She's not dead on the day of Hazel's funeral." Ethan was busy from morning till night. When he finally returned home, he saw Hazel waiting for him. His heart leaped with joy. He strode over and pulled her into a tight embrace. "I knew you'd come back," Grace frowned. She realized Ethan was mistaking her for Hazel. She was about to shatter his illusion, but then she had another idea. She wrapped her arms around his lean waist and said softly, "Ethan, I've always been here." Ethan's brow furrowed instantly. He caught the scent of her perfume and quickly pushed her away. His face darkened. "Don't wear such strong perfume in the future. It makes me sick." He turned and went upstairs without a backward glance. Grace stood there, trembling with humiliation. He had said she made him sick. Why did that woman, even in death, have to haunt them and stand in their way? Grace showered and, wrapped in a robe, entered the bedroom. Ethan was engrossed in his computer and didn't notice her. Grace climbed into bed. "Ethan, we've been married for so long. It's about time we had a child." With a child, her position as Mrs. Sterling would be solidified. But Ethan's body went rigid. A child. The word was a raw nerve. What must Hazel have felt when she found out she could never have children again? Ethan threw her off and got out of bed, his back to her, emanating an aura of cold indifference. "Grace, you should move out. We never got a marriage license. Let's just pretend the wedding never happened." Grace's long-suppressed anger finally erupted. "What do you mean? Ethan, are you breaking off the marriage? Are you abandoning me?" "Ha!" Grace couldn't help but laugh coldly. "Everyone knows I'm Mrs. Sterling now. Do you really think abandoning me is an option? Will Dad agree to it? He won't allow a scandal like divorce to tarnish the Sterling family name. You finally got married. He won't let you get divorced. You know better than I do how seriously your family takes marriage. Otherwise, he never would have approved of you marrying Hazel in the first place." She was right. When Hazel had been pregnant the second time, Ethan had wanted to marry her. But at that time, the Palmer family was in ruins, their reputation destroyed. Theodore had refused to approve the marriage. Then, Hazel had miscarried, and he had lost the will to fight for the marriage, spending all his time by her side instead. After that, he had made up his mind. He would refuse all the arranged marriages his father set up for him. Even if it meant never getting married, he didn't care. "Ethan, Hazel is dead. And now you're playing the devoted lover with me?" Grace laughed mockingly. "Are you only devoted to dead people?" Ethan's cold gaze swept over her, a chill that silenced her instantly. "Grace, there are a lot of things I haven't settled with you yet. If it weren't for the fact that I once felt I owed you, 1,000 deaths wouldn't be enough to appease my anger right now." With those cold words, Ethan slammed the door and left. At the cemetery, Ethan had been standing there for a long time. A light rain began to fall. "Mr. Sterling," Felix Asher said, finally speaking up as he held an umbrella over him. Ethan lowered his gaze and said softly, "Buy a plot next to this one. I want to be buried with her." "Mr. Sterling, your health isn't that bad yet. Sooner or later, it's all the same." Ethan's lips curved into a faint smile as he looked at the gravestone. "I wonder if she'll still recognize me in the underworld." Perhaps. She wouldn't want to. Ethan returned to the Sterling estate. Theodore was extremely displeased with his recent behavior. "How long are you going to keep this up? One woman dies, and you protest for 5 years. Now another woman is dead, and you're going to waste away again." Theodore could see that this time was different. When Grace was presumed dead after falling into the sea, her body never found, he had been despondent. But that time, it was more a protest against them, a form of rebellion. This time, he was torturing himself, giving up on himself. "You told me to run the company, so I'm running the company. You told me to come home for dinner, so I'm here. What more do you want?" Ethan's laugh was laced with sarcasm. Eleanor quickly stepped in to soothe him. "Your father doesn't mean it like that. Ethan, you can't go on like this. You can't bring the dead back to life. You have to keep living." After a moment's hesitation, she revealed their true intentions. Your father and I hope you'll have a child soon. Now that you and Grace are married, having a child is the natural next step. Have a child? Ethan threw his head back and laughed, his expression suddenly hardening. And for what? To be a machine like me, shouldering the burden of the family? To grow up like a robot, with no emotions, living day after day like a walking corpse? You insolent whelp, Theodore was so angry he coughed up blood. How dare you speak to me like that? Ethan sneered, unfazed. Dad, if you're not well, you should see a doctor. It's not worth dying of anger over an insolent whelp like me. That trick of yours doesn't work every time. His appetite gone, he went straight upstairs. He would sleep here for one night, leave in the morning, and another task would be completed. Grace followed him in, closing the door behind her. She sniffled and asked, Do you hate me that much? Was waiting 5 years for me all a lie? Ethan, you do have feelings for me, don't you? Ethan didn't turn around. Grace, you know I don't like to be indebted to anyone. I was always happy to have the chance to make things up to you. But now, I regret it more than anything. Regret. Grace looked at him nervously. Are you really going to end things with me? Ethan took out a cigarette and lit it, the lighter clicking shut. Perhaps he had been wrong from the very beginning. Trying to leave her with a fortune as compensation was a mistake. Trying to use his wedding to her to drive Hazel away was an even bigger mistake. He had tried to have it both ways, and in the end, he had lost everything. Perhaps he had underestimated his feelings for Hazel. He had thought it was just a chapter of his past, but it turned out to be an unforgettable love story. Let's end it. No, Grace was in a full-blown panic. She had never expected this. She frantically tried to collect her thoughts, seeing from his resolute expression that there was no turning back. Fine, I agree, she said, taking a deep breath, but I have one condition. Ethan turned his head, his eyes narrowing. I want $10 million. Hearing Grace's demand, Ethan felt a sense of relief, but also a twinge of self-mockery. He had thought she loved him deeply, to come back to him after 5 years. It turned out it was only for the money. Life went on. On the surface, Ethan seemed no different than before. He went to work, came home, but there was one new place he frequented, the hospital. The doctor told him his condition was stable, that he could live for another 2 years. Ethan felt no joy at this news, only a profound sense of disappointment. 2 years, it was too long. He was afraid Hazel would have already crossed the bridge of forgetfulness, drunk the soup of oblivion. He was terrified he would never find her again. This thought consumed him day by day. His mental state deteriorated, and he started having hallucinations. One day at the hospital, he ran into Simon Kingsley. Simon Kingsley, Ethan blocked his path. Simon looked at him coldly. Can I help you, Mr. Sterling? Ethan was taken aback. He wasn't sure why he had acted so impulsively. Given their relationship, they should have just ignored each other. But he had been to the hospital many times, and this was the first time he had seen Simon. A strong intuition told him something was off. On a whim, after leaving the hospital, he had Felix Asher look into Simon's whereabouts for the past year. The result was startling. He had been abroad for over a year and had just returned. Abroad for over a year? Doing what? Clearing his head, Ethan didn't pursue it any further. What was he thinking, investigating something so pointless? He finished dinner as usual and went upstairs. The house was empty. He had dismissed the maids long ago. He was the only one here, but he suddenly stopped. His gaze fell on a pair of slippers in the entryway. He frowned. If he remembered correctly, they were facing the wrong way. He cautiously scanned the living room. He sniffed the air and froze. That scent? It was her scent. It was faint, but he could definitely smell it. Ethan quickly searched the living room. No one. He looked upstairs and took the stairs 2 or 3 at a time. He threw open the bedroom door, the study door, the bathroom door, one after another. Her scent was everywhere. It was Hazel. She was back, a joyful smile spread across Ethan's face, his heart pounding so hard it was audible in the silent house. Hazel, is that you, Hazel? He walked through the house, trying to sense her presence. But after searching several times, he found no one. Ethan sat down in the living room, dejected. Was it just his imagination? For over a year, everything had pointed to her being gone. No one dared to even mention her name. But he had always felt that she would come back. Ethan covered his face. He knew it was impossible. On the anniversary of Hazel's death, Ethan went to the cemetery early. From a distance, he saw a blurry figure. As his vision cleared, his heart seemed to stop. That figure. He quickened his pace, then suddenly stopped. The figure before him was slender and frail, with long hair cascading down her back, dressed in a black trench coat. "Hazel!" Ethan murmured, unable to believe his eyes. He was ecstatic and terrified. Was this a dream? The woman heard him and looked over. There was no recognition in her eyes, just a slight frown. "Are you calling me?" It was Hazel, those eyebrows, those eyes, that mouth, her posture, her voice, it was all exactly like Hazel. "Ma'am, my name is Joanna," the girl said with a smile. It was just like the first time he met Hazel, a smile as bright as a sunflower. But she said her name was Joanna. Joanna, not Hazel. Ethan's smile slowly faded. But that wasn't right. Why was she standing in front of Hazel's grave? "Oh," Joanna said, as if she understood his confusion. She smiled. "You must be Mr. Sterling, right?" She knew him. "I came to see Hazel," Joanna said, her smile lovely. "A lot of people say I look like her. I was surprised too. I never thought there could be two people who look so alike." "And you are?" "Oh, right. Before Hazel passed away, she donated her heart to me." Joanna touched the spot over her heart, a grateful smile on her face. "The heart I have now was Hazel's. I just recovered not long ago, and I wanted to come back and see her." Ethan was in disbelief, but it all seemed to make sense. How could the person who had died in his arms possibly come back to life? And this girl? She did seem different from Hazel. To be precise, she was more like the 18-year-old Hazel, with a smile that could melt glaciers. But could there really be such a coincidence? On the drive back with her in his car, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about it. He watched her walk into her hotel, only to see Simon Kingsley. What was he doing here? Ethan immediately launched an investigation. The results were truly shocking. It turned out that Simon Kingsley had been abroad with this Joanna all this time. Her background was simple enough. She had grown up abroad, returned to the country at 18, and had been hospitalized ever since. A year ago, right around the time Hazel died, she had received a heart transplant. Not long after, she went abroad to recuperate and had only recently returned. Nothing seemed out of place, but why was Simon Kingsley with her? Because her heart was Hazel's. Because she also happened to look almost identical to Hazel. It was logical, and yet illogical. As Simon was entering the hotel, Ethan blocked his path. "What's going on?" Ethan asked, getting straight to the point. Simon feigned ignorance. "What do you mean?" "Cut the crap, I'm asking you what the hell is going on." Ethan's anger flared, a rarity for him over the past year. Simon adjusted his shirt and replied calmly, "You mean Joanna, you saw her. She looks just like Hazel. When I found out Hazel's heart was transplanted into her, I stayed by her side. I don't see how that's any of your business. Who gave you the right to give Hazel's heart to someone else?" Ethan's eyes were bloodshot. "I was in charge of Hazel's final arrangements. What I chose to do was my decision to make." Simon didn't want to waste any more words. He tried to walk past Ethan, but was shoved back. A fight was about to break out between them, but Simon managed to restrain himself. "I'll ask you one more time." Ethan's voice cracked. "Joanna, is she really not Hazel?" Simon scoffed. "Are you joking, Mr. Sterling? You saw Hazel's body with your own eyes." He had. He had even taken her body back with him, staying with it for hours. He was certain it was Hazel. "Do I need to say more?" Simon shot him a cold look and left. Ethan knew there was nothing more to be said. And because of that, when all his hope turned to despair in an instant, the devastation was absolute. He had thought his path would never cross with Hazel's again, and the same went for Joanna. But to his surprise, he ran into Joanna at the hospital one day. "Mr. Sterling," Joanna greeted him warmly. Ethan looked at her. "Here for a checkup?" "That's right." Joanna glanced around and made an enthusiastic offer. "Since we ran into each other, how about we grab coffee nearby?" Ethan hadn't expected the invitation and frowned slightly. "Don't get me wrong," Joanna said with a smile. "I'm just waiting for my test results, and I saw you just finished your checkup. I was wondering if you had time for a coffee." Ethan thought for a moment before nodding in agreement. Joanna stirred her coffee, occasionally glancing up at him. "Mr. Sterling, are you not feeling well?" Ethan's gaze shifted to the window. He didn't answer her directly. Joanna pursed her lips and didn't press the matter. But Ethan barely said another word for the rest of the time. He leaned back, thoughtfully watching the woman across from him, as if he were looking at her, and yet, as if he were looking through her at someone else. Joanna felt uneasy under his stare and took an awkward sip of her coffee. "You think I look a lot like Hazel, don't you?" "Not a lot," Ethan murmured softly. "Almost identical." He once thought Hazel and Grace looked similar, but now he realized they only had similar eyes. The woman before him, however, resembled Hazel in every way, from her features to her figure. "Mr. Sterling," Joanna said, trying to read the emotion in his eyes as she asked cautiously, "Are you missing Miss Palmer?" Missing her? Ethan froze. His well-defined fingers tightened, restraining the emotions surging within him. He missed her every moment of every day, so much that he was going mad. "Mr. Sterling? Don't call me Mr. Sterling anymore," Ethan interrupted, his brow furrowed. A moment later, realizing his tone was a bit too sharp, he relaxed his expression and said, "Call me Ethan." Joanna murmured, "Oh," then repeated his name to herself. "Ethan Sterling." After a moment, she suddenly smiled, the curve of her lips sweet and gentle. Ethan was mesmerized, his mind filled with Hazel's face. "What are you smiling about?" he asked, puzzled. Joanna answered with a grin, "I just think the world is a strange place. Who would have thought I'd one day meet you, Mr. Sterling, sitting across from you with Hazel's heart? Sometimes I can't even tell if I'm facing you as Hazel or as myself." Joanna's words made Ethan pause. It seemed she wasn't the only one who couldn't tell the difference, but Ethan warned himself not to make the same mistake again. He knew Hazel's place in his heart and didn't want anyone to replace her. Joanna cupped her chin and looked out the window, a smile still lingering on her lips. But within her bright eyes, there seemed to be another emotion. Ethan thought he saw loneliness, contemplation, longing. No, it was the calm that comes after weathering a storm. Ethan could hardly tell them apart. "Hazel? Ethan, the sky's getting dark." "It looks like it's going to rain," Joanna interrupted, checking the time. "I have to go back to the hospital to get my results. What about you?" She stood up as she asked. Ethan suppressed the rising tide of emotion. "I'm heading home." "All right then, next time perhaps." Joanna slipped on her overcoat and turned to hurry toward the door. Ethan rose and watched her go. Her back was cheerful and serene. How could she possibly be Hazel? If Hazel were still alive, she would have lost all passion for life. But why? Ethan covered his face. Why did he crave this feeling so much, this brief time with her? He craved it so much he wished it could last just a little longer. Perhaps his feelings for Hazel weren't as deep as he had imagined. So shallow that just a woman who looked like her could stir his emotions. A heavy rain began to fall outside, a sudden downpour. When Ethan reached the door, he saw Joanna taking shelter from the rain, looking helplessly at the misty curtain of water. "I'll give you a ride," Ethan said, coming to her side. Joanna looked up at him and forced a smile. "No, thank you. The rain is so heavy, I wouldn't want to trouble you." "It's no trouble. I'm heading in the same direction," Ethan said, then added after a pause, "If you run through this, you'll be a drowned rat by the time you get to the hospital." Joanna couldn't help but laugh. "Well then, thank you, Mr. Sterling." "Ethan." "All right, Ethan." Ethan drove her to the hospital entrance and watched her run inside. He had intended to leave, but just as he was about to drive off, the rain grew even heavier, drumming against the windshield. He stopped the car instinctively. When Joanna came out with her results, she saw Ethan's car was still there, honking at her. She ran over and slipped into the passenger seat. "Why haven't you left yet?" Before she could finish her sentence, Ethan was already handing her a dry towel. Joanna paused, then accepted it with a faint smile, gently dabbing the water from her hair. "How's your health?" Ethan asked nonchalantly, avoiding her question. Joanna's smile stiffened slightly. After a moment, she said, "Can't say if it's good or bad, just the same as always. I guess just being alive is good enough." Her words seemed optimistic, yet tinged with despair. Ethan didn't ask any more questions. He drove her back to her hotel. Joanna waved goodbye and hurried out of the car. He took out a cigarette and lit it, the lighter clicking shut. He exhaled a cloud of white smoke, but it did nothing to fill the emptiness inside him. He stubbed out the cigarette and was about to leave when his eyes caught Joanna's phone on the passenger seat. He looked up at the hotel, paused for a moment, then got out of the car with the phone. He could have just left the phone at the front desk, but after asking for Joanna's room number, he found himself wanting to deliver it in person. He knocked on her door, and it opened quickly. Joanna looked at him in surprise. clearly not expecting to see him there. "Your phone," Ethan said, handing it to her. Joanna finally realized, tapping her forehead. "Look at me, so forgetful, thank you." Your clothes are wet," Joanna noted with a frown. "Why don't you come in for a bit? Have a cup of hot tea before you go?" Ethan swallowed, his rationality still intact. "No, I should be going." He turned and walked to the elevator. Joanna stood at her door and called out, "Ethan, are you treating me so well because you see me as Hazel?" Ethan stopped and glanced back at her. Joanna nervously clutched the hem of her clothes. "If I said I have feelings for you too, would you be willing to give us a try?" Ethan was stunned. He hadn't expected this. "Are you single?" Joanna suddenly remembered to ask. "Yes," Ethan found himself answering with surprising speed. Joanna realized he wasn't rejecting the idea and smiled as she explained her thoughts. "I'm just recovering from a major illness, so I'm not sure what the future holds. And you've lost the woman you love. It's such a coincidence that I look so much like Hazel and even have her heart. I think we're a good match. What do you think?" Ethan didn't respond. His thoughts were a tangled mess. He was still in a state of shock by the time he got home. This house was filled with Hazel's shadow. "Ethan, you're back. I learned a new recipe today. Want to try it?" "Ethan, I'm waiting for you in the bedroom. You have to hurry." "Ethan Sterling, you're so mean, stop it. This is assault. I'm going to report you for abuse." Ethan slumped onto the sofa, his hands pressed to his forehead. His head was splitting. These shadows, these memories were driving him mad. He didn't know when this agony would end. "Mr. Sterling, your condition, you probably have less than a year." The rain had been falling for half a month, a relentless downpour that seemed determined to break a person's spirit. Late one night, the doorbell rang. Ethan, dressed in a light-colored casual shirt, got up from the sofa. No one should be coming here, especially not on a rainy night like this. He opened the door to see a drenched and miserable-looking Joanna. "Ethan," Joanna sobbed. The scene overlapped with a memory in Ethan's mind, one he could never erase. "Hazel," Joanna stepped inside, dripping wet. She suddenly turned and threw her arms around him. Ethan froze. "Ethan, can you just hold me?" Joanna's body was trembling, whether from cold or fear he couldn't tell. After a long moment, Ethan placed a hand on her back, patting it comfortingly. Joanna sniffled. "Ethan, hold me." Ethan's eyes darkened. He pulled her away slightly, his gaze fixed on her unusual behavior. "What happened?" Joanna sniffled, her eyes downcast, tears and raindrops indistinguishable. Her voice was hoarse. "There's a problem with my health. The doctor said I have to be hospitalized for observation." "Ethan, I don't want to go back to a place like that. I'd rather die than be hospitalized again. It was horrible." "The doctor didn't say it was necessarily bad." Joanna shook her head desperately. "You don't understand. I know exactly what the doctor meant. He wouldn't have said that or looked at me that way if my condition wasn't getting worse. I secretly looked into it, and it's just as I suspected. I might not live much longer." Might not live much longer, the word struck Ethan's heart. He was completely stunned, so Hazel's heart wouldn't live much longer either? "Ethan, hold me, I'm cold." Ethan pulled her into his arms, wrapping her tightly. "Hazel hates the cold." Hazel hates the cold. The rain finally stopped 3 days later. For those 3 days, Ethan didn't go to the office. He stayed at home with Joanna, cooking for her, taking care of her. He was trying to do all the things he had never done for Hazel. His unusual behavior soon reached Theodore's ears. Theodore called many times, but Ethan never answered. "Ethan, you really are a good man," Joanna said, sitting at the dining table in one of his white shirts, waiting for a delicious meal. She beamed, a look of pure happiness on her face. Hazel was so lucky. To have met a man like you in her lifetime, she could die without any regrets. Ethan's back stiffened, his grip on the ladle tightened. He and Hazel had had their good times, but only now did he realize he hadn't treated her well enough back then. In fact, it had only gotten worse. But why had that woman been willing to stay by his side without any complaints? Her demands had been so simple. What could it be if not love? Joanna paused. "Someone's at the door." She stood up nervously, unsure if she should answer it. Her status here was a bit awkward after all. But Ethan seemed unconcerned, not even turning his head. "Go get it." "Oh," Joanna replied, running to the door. Theodore stared at the woman who opened the door, completely stunned. Beside him, Elinor was even more shocked, speechless for a moment. You, Hazel?" Joanna frowned awkwardly. I'm not Hazel. Before she could finish, an arm rested on her shoulder. Ethan had appeared behind her, pulling her into his embrace as he stared coldly at the people at the door. Son, what's going on? Eleanor's voice was trembling. This was too frightening. Clearly, Hazel was clearly dead. She had seen with her own eyes as the servants carried her body away, and later, Simon Kingsley had taken her. But the person standing before them now wasn't that Hazel. The old couple exchanged glances, utterly bewildered. This is Joanna, Ethan introduced her coolly. Joanna? Could it be someone who just looked like Hazel? That was the only explanation Eleanor could think of, but even after they entered the house, it still felt incredibly strange. She studied Joanna's face, not knowing what to say, but Theodore quickly recovered from his shock. He knew why he was here. I hear you haven't been to the office for several days, he asked directly. Ethan acknowledged it with a casual air. It was raining, so I didn't go. I've already delegated my work at the company. Taking a break for myself shouldn't be a big deal, right? Theodore was shaking with anger. He glared at him, then at Joanna. He didn't care if this person was Hazel or just a look-alike named Joanna. He understood now. The reason Ethan hadn't been to the office was because of this woman. What are your intentions? Theodore asked bluntly. Are you planning to marry her? Marry her? Ethan glanced at Joanna, then couldn't help but let out a cold laugh at his father's words. I know what you're thinking, but you can give up on that idea. I won't marry her. Joanna's eyes widened slightly. Although she knew it was perfectly normal, a hint of disappointment still showed on her face. Then, what are you planning to do? Theodore was truly at his wits' end with his son. I don't know what to do with you anymore. Can you tell me what's going on in that head of yours? You're a mess, looking like a ghost day in and day out. You speak in that sarcastic tone, you don't come home to visit, you won't get married or have children. Now I tell you to marry this woman, and you refuse. What is it that you want? What I want is my business, you don't need to worry about it. Ethan wiped his hands, clearly in a mood to show them the door. If there's nothing else, you can leave. I don't want to argue with you. Theodore was furious. He knew Ethan was deliberately trying to anger him. Was it because he hadn't allowed him to marry Hazel back then? So now that Hazel was dead, he was taking it out on him? Forget it. Let our son do what he wants. Eleanor, caught between father and son, was exhausted. I told you, our son knows what he's doing. As long as he's all right, that's all that matters. As for who he wants to marry or not marry, that's up to him. I think he wants the Sterling family line to die out just to get back at me, Theodore stormed out, fuming. Eleanor sighed, not knowing whose side to take. Finally, she said to Joanna, take good care of Ethan. After she spoke, she still couldn't shake the feeling that she was the spitting image of Hazel. Once the old couple had left, Joanna looked at Ethan. His aura was so dark and gloomy. She gathered her courage for a long time before speaking. They're just worried about you. They're more worried about the Sterling Corporation and the family heir. Ethan turned and went upstairs. Joanna stood in the living room, motionless for a long time. Grace had been at the end of her rope when she decided to come back and find Ethan. She never expected to see Hazel. She watched in shock as they got into a car. Hazel isn't dead. She followed them all the way to the hospital, still unable to believe it. But no matter what, she had to get money from Ethan. Her previous severance pay had all been taken by that scumbag. After he spent it all, he started hitting her, demanding she come back for more. Grace had been trying to figure out how to ask Ethan for the money in a way he would agree. But seeing Hazel gave her a brilliant idea. Ethan had taken Joanna to the hospital for a follow-up. He had to go back to the office for an urgent matter, but promised to pick her up in the evening. Joanna came out on her own after her checkup. She sent Ethan a text saying she was heading back first. As she looked up, she saw Grace standing in front of her. The color in her eyes shifted, then she smiled. Miss, you're blocking my way. Grace studied the woman's face, frowning in confusion. She looked like Hazel, but not quite, and she seemed not to recognize her. Hazel, it's only been a short while. You don't recognize me anymore? Joanna laughed. Oh, you've mistaken me for Hazel. I'm Joanna, not Hazel. You've got the wrong person. Joanna tried to walk around her but was grabbed by the elbow. Grace sneered, Don't play games with me. I'd recognize you even if you were ashes. I need to talk to you. They found a nearby place to sit. Joanna urged, Whatever it is, say it, I have to go. Grace scoffed. I thought you were dead, but it turns out you were just playing the same trick as me. First, you faked your death, then you forced Ethan and me to break up. Once I was gone, you came back to his side. Ha, Hazel, not only did you copy my face, but you copied my methods too? A slow smile spread across Joanna's lips. I think I understand what you're saying. So you must be Grace? Before Grace could respond, Joanna tucked her long hair behind her ear. All right, let's just say I am Hazel. What do you want? Straight to the point, I like that. Grace smiled triumphantly. It's simple. Give me $10 million and I promise I'll disappear and never bother Ethan again. And if I don't, you don't. Joanna's attitude infuriated Grace. She laughed coldly. You might be underestimating me. I only lost to you before because I thought you were dead. Now that you're alive, I can completely turn the tables. With just a little effort, I can make you suffer even more than last time. Do you believe me? Really? Joanna smiled, unconcerned. You can try. I'm looking forward to it. Joanna stood up to leave. Grace shouted after her, enraged. You think I don't dare? Have you forgotten how I killed your mother, how I forced you into prison, how I almost let you die in there? Joanna's step slowed. Her fists clenched. Suddenly, she bent down, picked up the hot coffee from a nearby customer's table, and walked back without a word. Before Grace could react, she had poured the hot coffee over her head. Ah, Grace screamed in pain. Joanna dropped the cup with a sharp clatter. She took a napkin and wiped her hands, her smile dark yet seemingly harmless. Who do you think Ethan will feel sorry for? You or me? Amidst Grace's cries, Joanna turned and walked away with a flourish. As she passed the table of the customer whose coffee she had taken, she politely apologized, paid for it, and left. When Ethan returned that evening, Joanna was watching a soap opera. How did it go? Ethan asked, leaning over her from behind. Fairly stable, Joanna said, tilting her head back to look at him, her face beaming. I won't be dying anytime soon. Ethan nodded and went to the kitchen to prepare food. Joanna followed him, holding a bowl of popcorn, and leaned against the doorframe. There's something I need to report to you. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Grace came to see me today, Joanna said after a pause. From what she said, it seems she wants money. She also threatened me with a bunch of nonsense. She probably thought I was Hazel. I got angry and I got physical. You're not mad, are you? Ethan continued with his work. Why would I be mad? From what she said, it seems she was someone you loved very much, Joanna said, popping a piece of popcorn into her mouth. I'm confused now, so who is it you love, Hazel or this Grace? Ethan's lips curved slightly. What do you think? I can't tell. Joanna bit her lip and walked up behind him, speaking softly. But Grace said she killed Hazel's mother and forced Hazel into prison. When she said those things, my heart ached. Ethan suddenly stopped. He slowly turned to face her. Joanna took his hand and placed it over her heart. Ethan could feel the rhythm of its beat. Can you feel it? Joanna asked him. It hurts. Ethan couldn't resist. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tighter and tighter. He didn't want to see Hazel's heart in pain. She must have been in so much agony, so much grief. Grace threw herself in front of Ethan's car. Ethan pushed the door open and got out. The winter wind was biting cold. Ethan looked at the woman who had rushed toward him, pushing her away with a disgusted frown. Ethan? Grace's nose was red from the cold, tears streaming down her face. I've missed you so much. Missed me? Ethan chuckled. Or missed my money? Grace froze. That bitch Hazel told you, didn't she? Ethan, she's framing me. I just wanted to talk to her that day. I knew she was still alive, and the guilt in my heart finally lessened a little. But I never expected that after just a few words, she would attack me. Look. Grace lifted her bangs to show him the still healing scar. She did this, Ethan's eyes grew cold. Back then, to frame her mother, you didn't hesitate to fake a serious injury on your own face. That wound was much worse than this one. What's a little scratch like this to you? Grace was stunned as the man walked past her. She spun around. Ethan, all right, let's not talk about that. Can you lend me some money? She added hastily. I really had no other choice but to come to you. Grace, Ethan said, his profile dark and his tone even darker. What I owed you, I've already paid back. You have no right to take another cent from me. What he owed her, he had paid for with Hazel's entire world. How many times had he wished Grace had been the one to die in her place? Grace watched Ethan's resolute figure disappear into the building, her fists clenched in anger. Her phone was ringing incessantly. It was that scumbag, Victor, hounding her. She answered furiously. I'm working on it. What more do you want? Do you have to push me to my death before you're satisfied? I'm warning you, I want to see the money by tomorrow afternoon at the latest. If I'm not happy, I'll make sure you're not happy either. If I'm not happy, I'll make sure you're not happy either. Hazel, you forced my hand, you just wait. Tomorrow, I'll deliver the money to you in person. After hanging up, Grace's eyes were bloodshot. A bloodthirsty, cold smile spread across her face. At 3 in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. Joanna closed her laptop. Ethan's back. So early today. She got up to open the door. The moment it opened, a dagger was pressed against her neck. Joanna's eyes widened in terror. What are you doing? Grace pushed her inside, slamming the door shut behind them. The dagger nicked Joanna's fair neck, and a trickle of blood ran down the cut. Joanna didn't dare move, backing up until she reached the edge of the sofa, where Grace shoved her down. You forced me to do this, Grace whispered in her ear, a taunting sneer on her lips. Grace flipped open the laptop and pushed her head toward it. Transfer the money to me, $10 million. I don't have that much money, Joanna said, her face cold, unmoving. How could you not? Ethan must have given you plenty of money before. Even if he didn't then, now that you're with him, he must have given you plenty of cards, right? He didn't give me anything. I have no money. No matter what Grace said, Joanna insisted she had no money. Grace was already on the verge of a mental breakdown and couldn't stand her defiance. She pressed the dagger harder. Joanna winced in pain but didn't make a sound. You think you can fool me? You think I can't do anything to you? Grace laughed maniacally. Let me tell you, I'm desperate for money right now. If I don't get it, I'm capable of anything. As she spoke, she moved the dagger to Joanna's face, a bloodthirsty smile on her lips. If it weren't for this face, you wouldn't be living this good life. Do you believe I'll ruin this face of yours and leave you with nothing? Hearing this, the last trace of fear on Joanna's face vanished. Instead, she laughed, her voice calm. Is that so? You think I don't dare? Of course, I know you're capable of anything, Joanna said, her long eyelashes drooping. I'm also very curious to see how Ethan would react if this face were ruined. Grace's eyes widened in horror. She never expected this woman to be so unfazed. Are you provoking me? Grace was triggered, shouting, Transfer the money, now or text Ethan and tell him to give you $1 million. Immediately, and if I don't? Joanna's calm question made Grace panic. In her agitation, she cut Joanna's face. You asked for this. At the same time, Joanna grabbed her wrist, forcing the dagger deeper. Grace was stunned. What is she doing? She watched as Joanna guided her hand, pressing the blade firmly against her own face. There was no hesitation in her eyes, only a terrifying calm. Grace panicked. She tried to pull her hand back, but she couldn't break free. Only when Joanna let go did she stumble back, muttering in disbelief. You're insane, you're insane. Joanna bent down, picked up the fallen dagger and walked toward her, step by step. Grace had nowhere to run. She tried to escape, but Joanna pinned her against the door. The dagger rested on her face as Joanna asked playfully, Tell me, what do you think would happen if your face were ruined? No, don't. Joanna slowly traced the blade over her skin, her calmness making her all the more frightening. Suddenly, she smiled. What are you afraid of? Why would I ruin your face? Wouldn't that be letting you off too easy? What do you want? Without answering, Joanna slowly walked back and picked up her phone to call Ethan. Realizing what she was doing, Grace rushed over and snatched it from her. Don't you dare call him. Ethan was in a meeting when he saw Joanna's call and answered it. The conversation he heard on the other end made his nerves tight. He shot up from his seat. CEO Sterling. Call the police. Ethan strode out of the room. Felix Asher didn't hesitate, immediately dialing 911. Ethan ran countless red lights on the way, not even blinking. When he reached the villa, he kicked the door open, but apart from bloodstains, the house was empty. He searched upstairs and downstairs, but there was no one. His phone rang. He answered immediately. It was a gruff male voice. Bring $10 million to save them. Otherwise, neither of these women will make it out alive. The man gave him an address and demanded he come alone. Otherwise, he'd kill the hostages. Ethan immediately got the money. With everything prepared, he went alone. It was an abandoned, remote factory. He got out of the car and walked inside, carrying the bag. Stop! Hearing the voice, he stopped and looked to the side. Joanna and Grace were tied up together, and a man with a vicious face was walking toward him. "Looks like these two women are really important to you," the middle-aged man sneered, keeping a cautious distance of 2 meters. Ethan's face was grim. "I've brought the money. Let them go," he said calmly. "I need to count the money," the man countered, but Ethan was firm. "Let them go first." "Damn it," the man swore, his temper flaring. "What right do you have to negotiate with me now? The lives of these two women are in my hands." Ethan's dark eyelashes trembled. He saw Joanna's face, covered in blood, looking like she was on the verge of death. Grace was crying and begging. "Ethan, save me, this man has lost his mind." Grace truly hadn't expected Victor Russo to follow her. He had broken in while she was fighting with Hazel and had brought them here. Ethan never compromised with anyone, but seeing Joanna's state, he threw the bag forward. His anger was at its peak, but he suppressed it. $10 million. Not a cent less. The middle-aged man grunted triumphantly, opened the bag to check, and after counting, spat with satisfaction. Finally got the money, he glanced back at the two women, then said to Ethan with a swagger, "You can only take one of them. I need to keep the other as a hostage. How do I know you didn't call the police? I need to make sure I can get out of here." "As you wish." Ethan strode toward Joanna and untied them both. Grace joyfully threw her arms around him. "Ethan, I knew you still loved me. You'll definitely take me with you, right?" Ethan coldly pushed her away and knelt to lift Joanna into his arms. "You know who he is better than I do. Stop putting on this act with him." Seeing him about to leave, Grace panicked completely. "Ethan, take me with you. He's insane. I'm useless to him now. He'll only hurt me and torture me if he can't escape. He'll take me down with him." Ethan didn't look back. In his arms, Joanna was murmuring something unintelligible. Pained, Ethan held her tighter and carried her to the car. The kidnapping case was solved the next day. The kidnapper confessed everything, and in doing so, exposed all of Grace's deceptions. It was only then that Ethan learned that Grace's accidental fall into the sea had been nothing more than a self-staged drama. But because Catherine Palmer had died of a heart attack before she could be convicted, Grace couldn't be charged with any crime. Her viciousness had cost a life, but the law couldn't touch her. A few days later, however, Grace's body was found by the sea. The investigation revealed she had complex ties to the criminal underworld and had offended some powerful figures. Her death was gruesome, and so the matter came to a close. Less than a month later, Ethan's health collapsed. It was as if everything had ended and the last breath of strength he had was gone. He suddenly became weak. Hospitalization, treatment, but it was late-stage cancer, and there was no cure. Especially when a person gives up on fighting, the decline is swift and unstoppable. But Ethan was surprisingly calm. In fact, he had never felt so at peace. Joanna visited him every day, preparing special dishes for him. They even tasted remarkably similar to Hazel's cooking. Ethan lay in the sunlight, a faint smile on his lips. Perhaps when a person is dying, they tend to remember the beautiful moments and their memories become blurred. He was willing to believe that the person by his side now was Hazel. One day, he struggled out of bed, wanting to walk on his own. It was already spring, the flowers in bloom. He wanted to see the world one last time. As he reached a corner, he heard Joanna's voice and instinctively stopped. "Hazel, he's dying. Just tell him the truth." It was Simon Kingsley. Ethan's heart jolted. "Hazel, Hazel. Simon, I'm grateful you've kept my secret, but please, continue to keep it for me." Hazel lowered her head, tears dripping onto her toes. She pushed her long hair to the side to cover the still healing wound on her face. She had thought ruining this face would make her feel better, that Grace's death would bring her satisfaction, that Ethan's misfortune would bring her joy, but it didn't. "Hazel, even after dying once, you still haven't learned to let go. You're so useless." The moment she learned he had cancer, she had felt such sharp pain. Watching him weaken day by day, her heart was breaking. If that was the case, then it was better to let Hazel truly be dead. That way, perhaps they could both let themselves go. Simon saw the man behind her, his expression freezing. Hazel sensed it and turned around. At the same time, she fell into a warm embrace. The sudden warmth made Hazel burst into tears. She clung to Ethan, unable to control herself, unable to pretend any longer. Simon left tactfully. It was true, after all. What didn't belong to him would never be his, no matter the circumstances. But as long as she was happy, that was enough. As long as she was happy, whatever she wanted to do, he would always be there to support her. Hazel, if he ultimately leaves this world, I am willing to stay with you until we are old, even if I can only stand behind you for a lifetime. I would do so gladly. Hazel, Ethan's voice trembled with excitement, with gratitude. He kissed the top of her head, wanting to melt her into his very being, terrified that if he let go, she would disappear again. Hazel, Hazel. He called her name over and over, trying to confirm if the woman in his arms was really her. Was he dreaming? Was this all real? Or had he already passed on to the afterlife, and that was why he could see her? It's me. Hazel's response confirmed it. This was not a dream. Tears fell from Ethan's eyes, and he was too choked up to speak. Ethan refused to stay in the hospital, insisting on going home to recuperate. Hazel was against it, but Ethan was firm. He said he wanted to spend the last moments of his life with her. That night, Ethan held her tightly, refusing to let go. When Hazel's limbs grew numb and she wanted to go to the bathroom, Ethan grabbed her hand. Hazel, he was afraid she would leave and not come back. Hazel patted his hand. I just need to use the bathroom. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Even with her reassurance, Ethan was still uneasy. Though walking was a struggle, he insisted on going with her. Hazel thought he was acting like a child. In the days that followed, Ethan was always clinging to her. No matter what she did, he had to watch her, to make sure she was in his sight before he could feel at ease. As Hazel made breakfast, he sat nearby, his eyes fixed on her as she bustled about. Hazel, Ethan suddenly asked, do you still hate me? Hazel paused what she was doing and took a deep breath. Hate him. She had hated him once, hated him for walking into her world, destroying it, and then walking away unscathed, leaving her alone and miserable. She had even come back this time seeking revenge. When she learned he wasn't with Grace, when she learned about his state over the past year, she should have felt vindicated. But she couldn't sort out her feelings. Later, when Simon told her he didn't have much time left, Hazel finally understood what it meant for her entire world to collapse. Whether it was love or hatred that had sustained her, the central pillar of her existence was Ethan. She had wanted to make him fall in love with her and then ruthlessly abandon him. But the outcome was something she had never imagined. Hazel placed the breakfast in front of him and managed a small smile. Eat your breakfast. Ethan wanted to press the issue, but the doorbell rang. Hazel knew it was his parents. After learning about his cancer, Theodore's attitude had changed dramatically. For some time now, the old couple had been visiting almost every day. Son, this is the nutritious meal Mom made for you. I consulted with specialists. Eating this will be good for your health. Eleanor's eyes were swollen from crying. She had been pulling strings and consulting experts everywhere. Theodore had also contacted specialists both at home and abroad. Your mother woke up early to make this. Eat a little, whether you have an appetite or not. Theodore's expression was as grim as ever, but his tone was noticeably gentler. Ethan, his face also cold, took a sip of the soup as a token gesture. Eleanor held Hazel's hand, tears streaming down her face. You're really Hazel. You weren't. I did walk through the gates of hell and back, but I didn't die. At the time, she had truly given up and wanted to die. But Simon had saved her, telling her that if she died like that, it would be a true waste. Later, he announced her death to everyone, violating his medical ethics. The body Ethan had seen was not Hazel's at all, just a woman with a similar build and appearance. Perhaps Ethan, overcome with grief, hadn't doubted it and had been so certain it was her. The bloodstains covering the face had also helped in the misidentification. Simon had given her a new identity, covered all her tracks, and stayed with her for a long time until she finally recovered. Eleanor didn't ask any more questions. She just felt that it was a good thing she was alive and well, and she was deeply regretful for not accepting her before, which had led to this series of tragedies. How could Hazel still hold a grudge? As the two women talked, Theodore coughed, wanting to apologize but too proud to say the words. Finally, the relationship had eased. After seeing the old couple off, Ethan took Hazel's hand. His palm was a little cold, but he still tried his best to give her warmth. Though no words were spoken, Hazel felt an unprecedented sense of peace. Ethan went abroad for treatment. Hazel had planned to go with him, but she was pregnant. The news sent Hazel into a state of ecstatic joy. Are you serious? Hazel asked the doctor for confirmation again. The doctor nodded and congratulated her. It's actually very difficult for you to conceive given your condition, but this is a happy accident. You are indeed pregnant. Hazel walked out of the hospital, crying tears of joy. She looked up at the warm sunlight, grateful to the heavens. Finally, Ethan had left something behind. This child was enough for her to remember Ethan for a lifetime. That night, she told Ethan the good news. He was lying in bed, his body already very weak. But hearing her words, he excitedly got out of bed and pulled her into his arms. Hazel could feel his body trembling with excitement. "This is wonderful, Hazel," he said in a low voice, his words muffled against her ear. He was filled with both regret and joy. "I've always regretted that. Now, finally, I can leave in peace." "Don't go," Hazel buried her head in his chest. "Ethan, please don't give up, okay? Maybe there's still a chance. I want you to be with me for the rest of my life. Don't leave me alone." Ethan closed his eyes, resting his chin on top of her head. His voice was muffled. "I was too selfish," he said. "I was only thinking about how I didn't have much time left. I thought keeping the baby would be a burden on you. And as for the child, I know what my father is like. Even if he didn't acknowledge you, he would have taken the child and raised him to be like me. I was so selfish. I only thought about preventing all that, but I never considered what you thought." He had calculated everything, leaving no room for error, but he had forgotten to account for feelings. And now that the consequences were here, he had no way to undo his regrets. "It's all in the past," Hazel said softly. "Ethan, let's wipe the slate clean. From now on, let's walk this path together, okay?" Ethan leaned down and kissed her, a flurry of kisses landing on her lips. He said, "Okay." Ethan went abroad for a long period of treatment. Hazel lived each day with purpose, waiting for his return. She thought it would be a long time. Her belly grew bigger day by day. She waited anxiously for his messages, terrified of hearing bad news, afraid that one day he would stop replying. On the day she went into labor, her emotions were a tangled mess. A new life was about to be born. But the child's father was not by her side. She never expected Ethan to suddenly appear. She looked at him in disbelief. "Is it really you?" "It's me." He held her hand tightly, staying with her. His palm was warm, real. He looked better, but still a bit haggard. His mother had told her about his situation. Ethan was actively cooperating with the treatment, and his condition was stable. But modern medicine couldn't completely cure him. He could only rely on his own willpower to live day by day. But thankfully, his condition was stable for now. Ethan said, "I'm trying my best to live, Hazel. I'll try even harder." Hazel was overwhelmed with gratitude, gripping his hand tightly. "Ethan, don't go, stay with me. I'm scared on my own. I'm right here by your side, always." When Hazel woke up again, Ethan was truly there. He kissed her forehead and smiled. "It's a girl. She's healthy. Hazel, you've worked hard." Tears streamed down Hazel's face, but she held back her sobs. Ethan was a good father. At least in the time since their daughter, Penny, was born, he had done an excellent job. No matter how tired he was, he would share the burden with Hazel. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, when Penny cried, he would be the first to get up and take care of her. He learned how to prepare formula, how to change diapers, how to dress her, how to bathe her. Although he was clumsy most of the time, Hazel was deeply moved. In the blink of an eye, Penny was 3 years old. Ethan's health hadn't taken any major turns for the worse. Whether it was due to his optimistic attitude or his active cooperation with treatment, his condition remained stable. One day, Ethan was lounging on the sofa. He pulled Hazel down to sit with him and asked her seriously, "Do you love me?" Hazel pursed her lips, not wanting to say something as cheesy as "I love you." But her love for him, did it even need to be said? "Do you love me or not?" "What's wrong with you today?" Hazel felt he was acting strange. A sense of unease crept into her heart. She cupped his face and asked, "Are you not feeling well? Where does it hurt?" "I'll call the doctor." Ethan grabbed her hand. He said, "Hazel, let's get married." Let's get married. It was a difficult thing for Ethan to say. He was a man who could die at any moment, and he had no right to ask her to marry him. But he didn't want to leave with any regrets. He wanted to give her a wedding. He knew Hazel would say yes, but he had never dared to ask. "Are you serious?" "Yes." But this time, he had thought it through clearly. "I want to give you a wedding to give Penny a complete family. But Hazel, I might not be able to grow old with you. Would you mind?" Hazel's eyes instantly turned red. You fool, who would mind? Even if I can only be with you for a year, an hour, a minute, Ethan, I would feel content. The wedding was grand. Almost all the influential figures in the city were there. That day, Hazel, in her white gown, was breathtakingly beautiful. Ethan was stunned, lost in the moment. He had imagined she would be beautiful in a wedding dress, but this surpassed his imagination. From this day forward, she is my wife. Her name is Hazel. Ethan announced it to everyone. That day, a slideshow played moments from their past, documenting every detail of their journey. The wedding Hazel had always dreamed of, a wedding with just the two of them, had finally come true. Her parents weren't there to attend, but she knew their spirits in heaven must be very happy. Penny could now talk and walk. She was a clever little girl, and it was hard to say who she resembled more. Daddy, I want a kiss too. Ethan was holding Hazel on the sofa, being affectionate. Penny climbed onto Ethan's lap, pointing to her little face for a kiss. The couple laughed. Ethan lifted her onto his lap, his face full of doting love. Daddy can't kiss you, you're a big girl now. Why? Penny was very angry, pouting. Why did he always kiss Mommy, but not her? She wanted a kiss from her handsome daddy too. You don't love me. You only love Mommy, Penny complained, her arms crossed, sulking. Ethan and Hazel exchanged a smile. He finally kissed her on the forehead helplessly. Is that okay? Penny shook her head and pointed to her nose, then her lips. I want kisses on all of them. No. Why? Penny wrapped her arms around his neck and stood on his lap, pouting as she asked, Do you love Mommy more or me more? Hazel had a headache. How old was this little girl? Where did she learn this? I love Mommy more, Ethan actually answered. Penny wailed, feeling like she had been hit by a devastating blow. She was indeed the unloved child. The couple was amused by her and watched her cry, holding each other. Penny wiped her tears, realized crying was useless, and sadly went to watch cartoons. What did you say? Penny was picked up. Hazel hadn't been able to pick Penny up and immediately called Eleanor. Mom, did you pick Penny up? Eleanor said no. She and Theodore had gone to the hospital that day and didn't have time to pick up the child. Hazel thought it was unlikely anyway. If they were going to pick her up, they would have called. Then, where was the child? A sudden sense of unease crept into her mind, a foreboding feeling. She shook her head desperately. It can't be. She hurriedly made calls, contacting everyone who might have picked up the child. The result was certain. No one had picked her up. Then who had taken Penny? Ethan had someone check the surveillance footage. They quickly found out it was a middle-aged man. Seeing his build, Hazel felt a sense of familiarity. It's Victor Rosso. Ethan said the name with a frown. Only then did Hazel remember. He was the kidnapper from before. Wasn't he sentenced to 10 years? Hazel was confused. How could he be out? Ethan made a call to inquire and found out that just a short while ago, this man named Victor Rosso had injured a guard and escaped from prison. Why weren't we notified about something like this? Ethan was furious, slamming the phone down. He had dealt with that man before and knew what kind of person he was. Now that Penny had been taken by him, how could Ethan not be worried? But thankfully, the man was probably only after money. Ethan sent people to search while waiting for the kidnapper's call. The call came soon after. Ethan answered. Speak. Long time no see. The man's voice was filled with resentment, his cold laugh grating. CEO Sterling, I'm sure you already know who I am. I need money, and I need a safe way to leave the country. Get everything ready and come find me. I'm sure you know my rules. Don't call the police, or your daughter's life is forfeit. I mean it this time. You can't imagine how much anger a man who's been in prison for years has. I'll prepare the money. Don't hurt the child, or I will kill you. The other party hung up. Ethan quickly prepared the money. As he was about to get in the car, Hazel grabbed the door. I'm going with you. You wait here for news, Ethan said, his eyes darkening. He knew how dangerous this would be, but Hazel shook her head firmly. No, I'm going with you. She said, You and the child, I don't want to lose either of you. If it's really dangerous, I'm willing to face it with you. Even if we die, our family of 3 will die together. Her eyes were red as she spoke the heavy words. Ethan covered her mouth, not allowing her to say such things. I won't lose either of you. I will protect you both. They arrived at the destination. From a distance, they could hear Penny's cries. Hazel's heart ached, and she wanted to run forward, but Ethan pulled her behind him. Inside, they saw Victor Rosso, When he saw them, he sneered, "The whole family's here." "Good. I've brought the money," Ethan said, wasting no time. He threw the 10 million to him. "You stay here," Ethan whispered to Hazel, striding toward Penny. The little girl was tied up and thrown in a pile of hay, crying and whimpering. Ethan's heart ached, the veins on his forehead throbbing. But Victor blocked his path, a desperate and mocking grin on his face. "Same old rules, your woman and your daughter, you can only take one." Ethan's brow furrowed sharply, his gaze like daggers. Victor looked at the man's murderous expression and felt even more satisfied. He had been cooped up in prison for so long, dreaming of revenge every day. "Damn it, you dared to send me to prison. You should have known I'd come back for you." He wasn't afraid of anything now. At worst, he'd go back to prison. At worst, he'd get a longer sentence. But if he was unhappy, no one was going to live a happy life. "Ethan, take our daughter and go," Hazel shouted, almost begging. Because she knew that, with Ethan's personality, he would never give up on anyone. She rushed over, grabbing and pushing Ethan's arm. "Hurry, take Penny and go." Ethan grabbed her wrist, his cold eyes fixed on Victor. "We have to leave together." "I won't let go of anyone." He forcefully pulled Hazel along, holding Penny in his other arm, and tried to leave. "CEO Sterling, you don't really think I came unprepared, do you?" Victor laughed coldly. "I've rigged this place with bombs. If you dare to leave with both of them, then we all die here together." Ethan's brow furrowed heavily. He subtly scanned the area but saw no signs of a bomb. But since Victor said so, there was a real possibility. He couldn't gamble. Ethan turned, his expression grave. "I'll give you another 10 million. "Ha, CEO Sterling, do you think I'm a 3-year-old? Last time, you knew Grace was in my hands, and you still called the police and sent me to prison. This time, my leverage is even bigger and more useful. That's why I must have a hostage. Otherwise, even if I get more money, I won't be alive to spend it." "I can guarantee I won't call the police," Ethan said, his eyes darkening. "As long as you let us leave safely, I can give you an extra 10 million and ensure your safe departure from the country." Hazel looked at Ethan's profile. He seemed calm, but she knew he was extremely tense. Because the uncompromising Ethan Sterling was now negotiating. "Cut the crap," Victor had lost his patience. He roared, "Are we all going to die together, or are you going to leave one behind? You decide, Ethan." Hazel tugged at his sleeve. Ethan looked at her slender fingers, his throat tight. He knew what she wanted to say, but "No, I won't let you stay." "Ethan, I'm begging you." Hazel looked at the crying Penny. The little girl's voice was hoarse from crying, and she was sobbing on Ethan's shoulder. "I'm begging you, take Penny and go, okay?" "No," Ethan cut her off, his tone resolute. "Hazel, no." Hazel heard the despair in his voice as it grew quieter. "I can't bear to lose you again." Hazel's heart was struck fiercely. It was so painful, yet so happy. "Ethan, those words are enough." Just as she was about to make her final decision, she heard Ethan say, "Let them both go, I'll stay." Hazel was stunned, her grip on his hand tightening. He was going to trade his life for her and their daughter's safety. "You'll stay?" "I'm not that stupid," Victor sneered. "If it were a woman or a child, I could easily control them. But you, what if you try to pull something? Wouldn't I be in trouble?" The other party's logic was clear, and there was no room for negotiation. Ethan was silent for a long time. He placed Penny in Hazel's arms and pushed her to leave. At the same time, a dagger plunged deep into his own thigh. "Ethan, go," Ethan roared, then glared at Victor to stop him. "Now I'm injured. You can control me as you please. I can barely walk as a hostage. Are you satisfied?" Seeing Victor hesitate, he stabbed himself again in the same spot. Blood pooled on the ground, a shocking sight. Victor's temper subsided. He hadn't expected him to go this far. He sneered, "Seeing as you're so devoted, I'll grant you this." Hazel didn't know how she got out, got in the car, and drove away with Penny. The car sped away, but she had no destination. All she could think about was escaping quickly, not letting Ethan down, but tears blurred her vision. Her hands, her whole body was shaking. Her mind was a roaring mess. She had lost the ability to even think straight. All she could see was Ethan sacrificing his own life to protect them. He must have known that Victor was at his wits' end this time. If he couldn't escape, he would definitely take someone down with him. Ethan was prepared to die to protect them. "Mommy," sobbing, "is Daddy going to die?" Penny was terrified, crying as she asked. Hazel tightened her grip on the steering wheel. No, Daddy won't die. What should she do now? Call the police or not? If she called the police and their actions provoked Victor, and he decided to take Ethan down with him, what then? If she didn't call the police and let Victor get away, would Ethan be safe? Would Victor not seek revenge? These two thoughts crashed against her mind, and she was on the verge of breaking down. What would Ethan do? What would he want her to do right now? Call the police or not? Hazel forced herself to calm down. After a long moment, she still called the police. She thought that Ethan would rather risk his own life than let Victor get away with it, and if the police could stop Victor, then Ethan could be saved. After making this difficult decision, Hazel was filled with apprehension. It was late at night before she received news. Victor had been in a car accident during his escape. The scene was horrific. Victor was confirmed dead at the scene, and Ethan was critically injured and in a coma. He was in emergency surgery. Hazel's vision went black. She rushed to the hospital and waited outside the operating room for hours. She watched as Ethan was wheeled out. The doctor said the situation was still uncertain. If they were lucky, he would wake up the next day. If not, he could be asleep for a week, a month, or even longer. His body was already weak. How could it withstand such an ordeal? Hazel sat by his bedside, feeling her heart ache so much she could barely breathe. She waited day after day. A month passed in the blink of an eye, and Ethan still hadn't woken up. Penny was crying for her daddy today. I didn't bring her. I don't want her to see you like this. I hope that in her mind you will always be strong and tall, never falling. Hazel held his hand, pressing it against her cheek. She smiled faintly. Actually, I'm very grateful. I've seen every side of you, and it feels so complete. Ethan, if you saw yourself like this now, you probably couldn't imagine how terrible you used to be, so cold and quick to anger. I still like the gentle you. When are you going to wake up? I miss your embrace. Sunlight streamed in, illuminating Ethan's pale face. Hazel gently stroked his features. It was hard to imagine what this handsome face would look like when it grew old. What would Ethan look like with a full head of white hair? Winter arrived in the blink of an eye. The weather grew cold. Hazel woke up early to make breakfast. Mommy, is Daddy still not coming back today? Penny asked sullenly as she ate her breakfast. Hazel had been busy with her lately and hadn't been to the hospital for a few days. Hearing her question, her face darkened. She had been dreaming of Ethan lately, and several times she had thought he had really come back. Daddy is still on a business trip, but he'll be back soon. Really? Penny sighed, unhappy. Other kids' daddies go to parent-teacher conferences with them, but my daddy is always on a business trip. After complaining, she looked at her mommy seriously and asked slyly, Mommy, tell me the truth. Daddy found us in a garbage can, right? Hazel's mouth twitched. Where did you learn that from? Penny pouted. My desk mate, Luke. He said his dad got him as a free gift for topping up his phone. Hazel was speechless. Hurry up and eat. After breakfast, I'll take you to school. Are there any classes today that require parents to attend? Not today, Penny said, nibbling on her spoon. Mommy, are plane tickets to go abroad expensive? Hazel was surprised. Why do you ask? I was wondering if I've saved enough allowance money. As she spoke, the little girl ran to get her piggy bank, poured out the coins, and laid them out one by one to count. Hazel's eyes grew warm. What are you doing? Penny lifted her innocent little face. I'm saving up for a plane ticket to go see Daddy. Hey, Mommy, it's snowing outside. Hazel looked up. Yes, the snow was falling harder. It was getting colder. The doorbell rang. Hazel was puzzled. Penny cleverly jumped off her chair and ran joyfully to open the door. It must be Grandma. She said she would bring me yummy food today. Hazel shook her head helplessly. This little girl was always so happy when it came to food. She took the finished plates to the kitchen. Halfway there, she heard Penny exclaim, Daddy. Hazel froze. The next second, the plates in her hands crashed to the floor. She quickly turned around and instantly burst into tears. The person who had come in through the snow was none other than Ethan. He was wearing a down jacket, a faint smile on his pale face. He picked up Penny and kissed her, then looked at Hazel with gentle eyes. He looked unwell, but it didn't detract from his handsomeness. His arrival was handsome enough. Hazel covered her mouth in excitement, unable to believe her eyes. Tears rolled down her cheeks, one by one. Her legs felt as heavy as lead, unable to move. Ethan walked toward her. The closer he got, the stronger his unique scent became. It was him. It was Ethan. There was no mistake. I'm back, he said with a smile. Penny was excitedly bouncing in his arms. Mommy, you didn't lie to me, Daddy really came back. As she spoke, she peppered his face with kisses. Ethan frowned in mock disgust but was helpless against her. Penny explained, I have to get back all the kisses Daddy owes me every day. Ethan laughed and kissed her cheek. The little girl's face blossomed into a happy smile. Ethan put Penny down, and the little girl happily went to call her grandparents. Finally, it was quiet between them. Their eyes met, and many words seemed unnecessary. Hazel's voice was hoarse with emotion. When did you wake up? Not long ago, Ethan smiled. I told the hospital not to notify you. After my checkup confirmed I could walk, I came to find you right away. I thought you would be very happy. Happy was an understatement. Hazel's shoulders trembled. You shouldn't be running around instead of staying in the hospital. You know how bad your health is. Ethan chuckled, his voice weak. What, is my body so unsatisfactory to you? What is he saying? Is this really the time for such jokes? You finally decided to wake up, Hazel sniffled, looking away with a hint of resentment. Ethan took her hand and pulled her into his embrace. Hazel's cheek rested on his solid chest, and she could feel the beating of his heart. It felt so good. His voice floated down from above her head. He said, I was thinking that my Hazel is afraid of the cold. I didn't dare not wake up. Without me, how lonely would you be this winter? Not just this winter, Ethan. If you weren't by my side in this life, how lonely I would be. No matter how long you can stay, at least right now, you are in front of me, your embrace is warm, and you are real. That's enough. Hazel, have I ever told you that I love you? The most beautiful words of love are I love you. Hazel held him tighter. Ethan, I want to hear it again. I love you. I want to hear it again. I love you. No matter when, no matter where, Hazel, I am certain that I love you. She could never hear it enough, truly never enough. Ethan, please say it once every day, 100 times a day, until the day we grow old together. I love you too.